Ahway, amicus. Today we will be taking a look at one of the two major cities in Fallout 4, Diamond City. I find Diamond City to be a huge disappointment. One of the biggest disappointments in all of Fallout 4, and that's a very long list. In all previous Fallout games, there have been many towns. Towns are an opportunity for the devs to show multiple societies in different ways of life. The fact is, in the real world, people would survive in many different ways and form societies differently depending on where they are and what resources they have access to. That's why it's so interesting in a game like Fallout to see different examples of how people can go about doing this. The problem with Fallout 4 is that there are only two towns, and both towns show starkly different examples of how people live, but neither of these examples do anything particularly well. In fact, they fail at most basic elements of being a town that all previous games managed to do. Diamond City does not have an overarching quest line. This leads to it feeling empty, like there's not a lot going on, and there really isn't. Without having a main quest that encompasses the whole town or that affects everyone here on a broader level, it leads Diamond City to rely on the main story as its main quest line. This leads to Diamond City not really having its own identity. It just feels like a shell for aspects of the main quest and aspects of the world that the devs wanted to communicate haphazardly thrown together in a way that doesn't really make sense within the world, and lacks meaningful content that a Fallout town should have. Now, I know people will make the argument it's a 10-year-old game, but my criticisms are mostly writing-oriented, and writing compelling stories is not something hampered by engine limitations. I'll break down these aspects as well as everything else about the town. Let's start where things start, at the entrance. The entrance really is an important part of any location. It is the first impression a player will get from somewhere. The entrance to Diamond City certainly forms an impression. We are met with a closed green gate, which is set up for the scripted scene playing out ahead. Piper has been locked out by a Diamond City security worker named Danny Sullivan. She has been locked out because of a nasty article she wrote in her newspaper about the mayor. Okay, so question. Why was she outside in the first place? Was our quirky reporter getting reports from the super mutant battle one block to the right? Or perhaps the pack of feral irradiated dogs one block to the left? Why would they close the gate? This is almost ensuring that Piper would die out here. Is that the punishment for writing a rude article? Why close the gates now? You have Diamond City soldiers engaged in combat 100 yards away. If those men need to pull back, what are they going to do? Does Diamond City have such a surplus of men that they can afford to just throw them outside to the super mutants and shut the gates? We are off to a poor start, but let's sit through the dialogue. Piper asks us if we want in. This will be the first of many instances we shall see in this video of your dialogue having absolutely no impact. Which should surprise nobody, but we will frequently see this abortion of player choice as we continue. She lies to Danny Sullivan and says that we are a trader from Quincy, and blackmails him with the threat of the merchants in town being rightfully upset that the gate is halting all trade to the city. Okay, well, now I have another question. How long were they going to keep her locked out? Because they are literally blocking all trade to the city. Piper makes it seem like this is some clever trick she's pulled, but the fact remains that by having the gate shut, you've essentially just killed the men outside and quarantined an entire town from any trade. Not to mention potentially killing the caravans who would travel the dangerous wastes only to arrive and see a closed gate. Not to mention the caravans that might say, well, fuck Diamond City, we're not going to trade here anymore. They close their gates half the time when they're pissed at their quirky reporter. Unless, of course, I'm just looking too far into this and it's just a prank, bro. They weren't really going to keep it closed. But then why would they close it in the first place? This seems like a very extreme measure in response to writing a derogatory article, that's all. We open the gate and get another scripted encounter, which is not a bad thing in itself, but it's the way it plays out that irritates me. The mayor does something similar to the dialogue not mattering, and that is to railroad this game's abysmal main story. We will frequently encounter NPCs asking pointed questions with the purpose of encouraging the player to divulge information on that bastard Sean's kidnapping. Now, these may seem like normal questions, but the dialogue options make it fairly obvious that the game wants us to reveal Sean and follow the main story. Obvious to the point where it is forcing it to happen, or trying very hard to do so. It would be like in Fallout New Vegas if every town was just full of people making remarks about a man in a checkered suit to everyone that passed, hoping to eventually find the one man who would be looking for that information, rather than you having to ask around and try to get people to divulge that information to you. It's just ham-handed amateur writing, that's all. But be patient, dear viewer, there is yet more retardation to cover in this initial encounter. Then we are asked if we support freedom of the press. Okay, so this is one of those instances, like the one I brought up in my Good Neighbor video, where the characters in this world act as if they do not live in a post-apocalypse. They physically do, but mentally everybody seems to be living in a snarky first-world country with 2015 sensibilities and humor. When your daily struggles are to find food and water and not be killed by rapist gangs and literal fucking irradiated monsters, you're not going to care about the freedom of the press. You're not even going to know about the press. Your concept of the press wouldn't be what it needs to be for this exchange to be happening. Unless the NPCs know that you are the main character from 200 years ago and you do have an opinion on the press. Or they know that you're some basement-dwelling gamer who would also have an opinion on the press. But just like joking about your retirement in Good Neighbor doesn't make sense, because nobody in this third-world apocalyptic hellscape would have the luxury nor the means to do so, they wouldn't have a fucking concept of what that even is. So once again, just ham-handed amateur writing. Now let's continue. I say, fuck Piper, fuck your press, and fuck that bastard Sean. I'm just John Fallout. My murky past is irrelevant. The only thing that matters to me now is making some caps to fuel my addictions, to kill living things to feel strong and superior in a world that would love nothing more than to strip you down into a feral husk of a man. And to get laid during drug binges and maximize my physical comforts because it may be the last chance I ever have. Seems like a very typical mindset for someone in this kind of situation. It should be the normal expected attitude of a patron traveling into town from the wastes. Let's continue into Diamond City and see how much of this they can facilitate. Oh, and the Skinwalker Deacon, as always. Because the railroad is so cool and secretive, they stalk you while having no effect on the world. We take a lap around town and hear all of the initial dialogue encounters. There are a number of encounters set up to play when you walk by on your first time through the city. We see Piper and her kiddo greeting. Piper walks off and the child will try to sell us a newspaper. I can't fault her writing for trying to sell the newspaper. I mean, that is what she should be doing. However, it is interesting that everyone here behaves as if it's your first day in the Commonwealth. Everybody and their sister mentions the Institute constantly. But these people behave as though we would have no understanding of what it is. This makes sense because it's a video game and it really is our first time in this world, but it doesn't make sense within the world itself. It would be more fitting if they assumed that you were an Institute denier and treated you as ignorant and stupid for not caring. But not that you simply have no idea what the boogeyman of the Commonwealth even is. The people in Good Neighbor can manage to worry about the Institute through their celibate drug binges. I think we should assume that everybody would know about the Institute. Everybody will also be asking why we are in town, because the game wants us to mention the bastard Sean and begin the main quest. It's fine for people in a town to ask why a newcomer is here, and that is expected and very normal, especially if the town is supposedly paranoid about synths and fake humans. The problem arises when our dialogue options are, Sean, looking for someone, oh, what's Diamond City, and fuck you. It would make much more sense to have dialogue options about Sean, trade, work, and fuck you. And I'm saying fuck you because it's usually fuck you, but really it's just the I'll go away now and come back later line. Or maybe if the devs pulled some effort out of their asses 10 years ago and wrote more than 4 dialogue options, they could have expanded on the potential things someone might say on their first time in one of the 3 shanty towns in the Commonwealth. We take a lap and hear everybody speaking about the Institute. That's fine, gotta build up that anticlimax somehow. We hear about the railroad and the infamous Follow the Freedom Trail. A password so discreet that a child could have accidentally wandered into the railroad HQ, but somehow it eludes the Institute with a one-step solution to finding their super-secret underground railroad. We hear some genuinely good dialogue between NPCs discussing the food at the Dugout Inn. This dialogue actually feels like the kind of genuine interpersonal complaining that people actually do. They are not talking about existential threats or some random happenings at a witchcraft building across miles of zombie-infested land, or a random combat zone of raiders in the middle of the slaughterhouse tri-species war that is the inner city of Boston. They are just talking about the noodles and booze in town. Conversations like this make video game settlements feel like immersive and believable locations. Here's some praise, Bethesda. Do more of this. We are directed to speak to Abbot at the wall for a history lesson, which we will do shortly. Then, we can see Mayor McDonough give a speech to 8 townspeople behind the wall. I'm not sure if it's a glitch that barely anyone showed up, or this is just the manifestation of Diamond City's pitiful number of occupants. But the crowd is tiny. The mayor gives a speech, and it's surprisingly well written. It feels like a genuine politician's speech. Well done. In this speech, he fleshes out Diamond City a bit, adding some subtle details that indicate this is a real place, with well-known features and a history. Good job, Bethesda. But the crowd cheers, and now I'm reminded of how dated this game was even back in 2015. Now, before we get to Abbot, let's talk about the town's aesthetic from our first walkthrough. This may surprise you, but I love Diamond City's looks. Well, parts of it anyway. Aside from the tiny population and the lack of houses or anything utilizing the space in the stands, aside from the mayor, and the piles of shit laying all over town, just like any town in all of Fallout 4, the town does look beautiful. The shabby sheet metal houses, the cloths and curtains hanging over the towns, the pallets and plywood pathways, the noodle stand in the center, the smaller shacks built on rooftops, surrounded by various shops and facilities. It looks great. It looks like a post-apocalyptic shantytown. However, it does not look like a town 200 years into the post-apocalypse. Something I covered in length in the Good Neighbor video that I will briefly cover here. These places are filthy, disgusting, and underdeveloped. Now, I won't harp on this for too long, but essentially, this town looks like something made in the first 50 to 100 years of the post-apocalypse. This place looks like it just got hit by a hurricane. But living here 10 generations after the bombs blew up, this place should be cleaned up and taken care of. But Bethesda Fallout populations live like hoarder slob degenerates, and that's just something we have to accept. Write what you know, I guess. The aesthetic is amazing, just not fitting. Now, moving on. We speak to Abbot at the wall, and there is no history lesson. It goes right into giving the player a quest. I shit you not. Immediately, there's something I need from you, random person. I need you to go to a place too dangerous for the trained and armed Diamond City security and retrieve for me some paint. This is just so many levels of asinine. Where was the history lesson? Why would he ask me to go somewhere he himself says is too dangerous for the city's military force? Does he ask this of every newcomer? And finally, unless he knows that we are the main character and capable of literally any feat, then why the fuck would he ask this stranger, whom he doesn't know the temperament, morality, mentality, nor the capability to go do this dangerous task? And there is no way around it. We are locked into the awful 4-panel yes, yes, and I'll come back later dialogue. What the fuck, Bethesda? You were doing moderately well for a minute there, and then we went right into bullshit busy work as an excuse for immersive storytelling or world building. Alright, let's go get this guy's paint. We find a dungeon some distance away outside of the town. I'll note that it is close, which is a good thing considering the complaining about guards not being able to keep it safe. This is one of the few cases where the location of a fetch quest item is actually sensible, and the dungeon is one of my favorite intros, with a raider pretending to be asking for help. To my understanding, this is the only instance of this in Fallout 4, which is a shame because it's very immersive and realistic. They should do more of this in Fallout 5. For anyone less cynical than me, just know that if you're in a dangerous area and someone is shouting for help this emphatically, expect a trap. We slaughter some nameless raiders and find the paint. Upon returning, we are met with a scene in the Diamond City marketplace. This scripted scene is set to play for the second time you enter the marketplace. Whether you leave the town or simply walk inside and then back out of a building, you can expect this to be waiting for you. We see a Diamond City occupant pointing a gun at his brother, whom he believes is a synth. We shot the man many times because I swear I saw him flinch. First time I forgot I had my explosive Tommy gun and we were promptly slain. Try again, kill the man, and listen to the following dialogue. This is one of the few scripted scenes I particularly enjoy. Paranoia turns people against each other, and we see that actually playing out here very well. The guards congratulate us for shooting him, though they should have some dialogue about us continuing to unload a shotgun into a man in the crowd. Honestly, the guards should have some dialogue about any time we start just shooting our gun in Diamond City, but they don't, and that's whatever. Let's move on. I'll note that one of these Diamond City security guards is, once again, the skinwalker Deegan. So, hello Railroad, you're here. With no relevance, this Easter egg literally only serves to be an interesting thing you notice when reading the wiki. Then we head back to Abbot for some congratulations. I actually really enjoy seeing his dialogue here. It shows he cares deeply for the duty of painting the wall, and considers it almost a religious privilege to do so. Unfortunately, there is still no history lesson, and after the quest finishes, he pays us and offers no more interesting dialogue. Well, that is disappointing, but not surprising. That concludes the quest, Painting the Town. A fetch quest, but not necessarily a bad one. The lack of meaningful dialogue is an annoyance, but this quest does notably offer some player choice. When retrieving the paints, we don't have to mix it green. The player can bring back yellow or blue. For those of you that don't know, yellow and blue make green. And this will actually have an effect on the world. The wall will be painted either yellow or blue. Hooray for player choice. I'm proud of you, Bethesda. I'm actually so impressed that they put in a meaningful and lasting impact for a quest. This is the kind of thing we need more of, not only in Diamond City, but in all of Fallout. In all of your games in general, Bethesda. Now, let's grab a bite to eat and a bed for the night, and check out the marketplace in the morning. We have our first time in the Dugout Inn. I must say, I have almost nothing but praise to give about this establishment. This place has a quaint and fitting aesthetic. It feels like a homely small-town bar. This is a little odd because Diamond City, but it's fine for what it does. The idle dialogue when we enter is immersive and well written. A bartender telling a story about his impressive feats that aren't very impressive, and rightly called out by another patron. We receive a little backstory about the brothers who run the business. I will note that it is surprising they have Russian accents, because what Russians would be here? Actually, this does touch on a broader topic of diversity in Fallout. I'll just point out that it is odd to see diversity in accents. Diversity in skin color would absolutely be expected in a post-apocalypse like this, where all people would group together in societies. The odd part is when people would still be talking in different accents after generations of living in the exact same place. You only get an accent like this when English is not your first language, or you started learning English at a very young age alongside Russian. but you don't end up with accents like this, nor Hispanic accents, nor Irish accents, nor English accents, without being raised somewhere completely different where everyone else has those accents. So just a note that it doesn't really make sense. But the Russian accent on these brothers is endearing, and it adds a lot of character, so I can see why they did it. Now, we have a drink and buy a room. Notably, I must offer some very high praise for the one thing I enjoy about a voiced protagonist in this game, and that is the drunk voice. The player character, Nate, will actually have a slurred, abrasive, and drunk voice while having the effects of alcohol. It's a subtle touch, but incredibly immersive, and I must give praise when it's due.
You.
The wall's sure looking good lately. Guess Abbot found some more paint.
We spend the night and head out to the market in the morning. We will be back later, but for now, let's take a lap by each stall and see what this town has to offer the player. The first location on our route is the local butcher, Choice Chops. This location is a fairly straightforward NPC shop. The woman, Polly, stands in her booth cutting Brahmin meat. The stand is built from the side of her house. She sells Brahmin meat and other various proteins. That's about it. She talks about occasionally getting strange meats from caravans, and she grunts if we refuse to buy. It is great aesthetically to see a butcher. She has a fitting disposition for someone with that kind of job in a place like this, and her store offers a service that the town would actually need. It all checks out. It brings immersion to the town, and most importantly, it doesn't do anything stupid. Unfortunately, the butcher offers no quests. No caravans charging exorbitant prices that need a tough guy to go rough them up and give Polly a better deal. No mysterious meats that warrant investigation. I'm generally not a fan of Diamond City patrons just giving out quests from across the map, like they do with the Witchcraft Museum, but I think Polly would have been a fitting person to start the quest about the tainted meat factory along the northeastern coast. Maybe her patrons are getting sick, and she cannot afford to lose any customers, so she asks us to please investigate. A quest isn't necessary, but I think it would have helped this store out a bit more. Overall, this is a good store. Let's move down the block to that shouting greaser wannabe. The next location is the hairdresser in town, Cathy and John's Super Salon, a mother and son establishment that does just one thing, cutting hair. This stall is once again inoffensive and well-crafted. There are two loudmouth hosts, the son and his mother. They bicker with some very well-written dialogue. Also, his mother has the smokiest cigarette I've ever seen. Please find me this cigarette, I want to try it. The mother will pull you into a discussion that has clearly been ongoing and ask whether or not you think the mayor's secretary is a synth. I'm all about gassing up crackheads, so I say yes, of course, and the following dialogue is once again well written. It's believable. These people are one of the few people in town actually behaving as if they suspect people are synths. Aside from getting a haircut, this interaction is the only notable thing I have found here. The store is nice, it makes sense, people would need their greasy hair cut, and the NPCs are pleasant and immersive. Let's continue down the strip to the sunburnt jockey shouting about the wood he's holding. The next location is a baseball bat stand named Swatters. The host is a raspy man named Mo Cronin. Notably, he has the muscular neck where the devs forgot that men have an Adam's apple, but that's irrelevant to this shop. I must give praise where it's due. This NPC does not ask random people to go on fetch quests for him. We have to intentionally inquire about looking for work for Mo to offer this quest. That quest is to go to a Hall of Famer's house and find the relics. Those are assigned card, mitt, and bat. This is a fitting quest for someone whose entire business is baseball bats. Though, I do wonder about how he could stay in business. Like, how are you getting this much wood? The trees around here clearly aren't growing, or they're just growing dead constantly. And who are you selling bats to? The Diamond City security guards need some, and then I assume you'd sell one to every citizen, and then what? Are caravans coming in to get bats over going right next door to Arturo's for guns? I appreciate this place being here, and it's very fitting and adds character to Diamond City with the whole baseball aesthetic, but I doubt how much this store could actually stay in business. I think it would make more sense if it was a bat store and an antique store. he's collecting old baseball paraphernalia, and that's why he's obsessed with bats and sells specific bats. But he also gets by just collecting odds and ends and selling those as well. I think that would make a lot more sense with the world around it. Now, let's go find those crusty ballgame relics and see if 200-year-old sweat still carries a stench. Before we walk away from the stand, we see a crackhead tweaking about Nuka-Cola. Sheffield is his name, and we are tasked with retrieving a Nuka-Cola for him. We will grab one on our journey for the baseball paraphernalia as we go. We travel to a lake house outside of the city filled with mirelurks. I'm pleasantly surprised that once again the distance of the fetch quest isn't insanely far, and that the items are actually believable things to find. By not having the quest be an insanely far distance away and having the items be something that I could actually expect Mo to know about, this helps the quest feel less like busy work and more like an actual favor this guy would need done. We return with all 3 artifacts and make some nice caps while hearing some immersive dialogue from Mo about his assumptions of how baseball was played. I really enjoyed the detail of his interpretation, and that is 100% what would happen in a post-apocalypse looking at images of a forgotten past. I mean, this is exactly what we do with ancient cultures. We just look at the evidence available and try to come up with our best guess. This detail adds a lot to the world and is very immersive. This quest is named Out in Left Field, and it's not offensively boring, but it is just a fetch quest without any player choice involved, aside from the fetching part. Might have been interesting if we met a traveling merchant who was also looking for these items, and maybe this traveling merchant would sell us fake copies of these unique items, and we could sell those to Mo, or have to persuade him, and if we fail, he hates us. Something interesting that adds more to this quest than just running and killing mirelurks. Now, as for Sheffield, we do a classic stealing without stealing and then stealing technique that we learned from Skyrim to get his Nuka-Cola. Very oddly, the player character seems to automatically offer Sheffield a job working for us. See, the game wants us to send him to a settlement, but I don't care about this crackhead and I don't care about settlements. In fact, I don't even have a single settlement in this playthrough. So, Bethesda, could you please stop writing my fucking character for me? Come work for me? Neither he nor I know each other whatsoever. Does he have family here? Am I certain that he is so destitute and fucking brain dead that he would just up and leave the safety of Diamond City to what? To work for me? Not live in a safe place I made, or join my new town to the northeast. No, the phrase is just, hey, I brought you a drink. Now, would you like to be mine? It's just a really odd and really forced bit of dialogue from these writers. As we are standing there, a Diamond City guard informs us that the Bobrov brothers in the Dugout Inn are looking for us. Well, that's good enough direction before we continue exploring the shops in the city. Let's go check in on our Russian bros. The brothers initiate a dialogue that seems to be leading to killing Travis, the Diamond City radio host. John Fallout is all on board. He hates weakness and he hates weak jaws even more. But this is only a joke. Really, the brothers want to boost his confidence by staging a rigged fight in which the player will help Travis win. One of the brothers has hired some tough-looking goons to show up at the bar, and the radio host and the player will fight them. I think it would have made infinitely more sense to ask us to be the one fighting him and taking the fall, rather than asking a stranger to help in a fixed fight. I know they couldn't do this because the whole point will be that the goons don't follow orders. But from the get-go, this is a very strange plan. I will praise the dialogue of the brothers once again. They are very expressive and really add a lot of character to the lines they are delivering, especially the increasing frustration when we do the yellow, orange, red for more caps.
Ah! This is extortion! 300 caps, no more!
Well, I sit my ass down and wait a day. Let's see how this scheme plays out. Well, the plan went terribly. I initiated contact too soon and my cover was blown. I have to abort. Let's try again. So, the goon will sit here and recycle the same lines with Travis until we initiate contact. Well, we tell Travis to grow a pair and he stands up to the men. We engage in a classic gentleman's game of fisticuffs until the rapscallions have been suitably beaten. Then, Travis talks to us, thanks us for the help, and leaves the bar. The men stand up and quietly leave. Okay, well, that shouldn't have worked out, but it did, and we go see about our reward. But, what a surprise, there is yet another step to this plan. We are told that Travis has the hots for the bartender Scarlett. Vadim asks us to go and speak with her, to try and nudge her in the direction of spending time with Travis. We head out of the bar on our Cupid quest to go find Scarlett. We find her and she tells us that Travis was very brave during the fight. Well, la-dee-da. I do love any time the game gives us the option to threaten people. It feels like old Fallout. We literally threaten her into going to see the guy she likes and walk her over there just to make sure.
Couldn't just go over there.
Look, either you can go visit Travis or you can go visit the doctor. Your choice.
It's dangerous out here at night, guys. Be careful. She makes it, and we can go rest easy. It's not easy being a matchmaker in the Commonwealth. We head back to the bar, but oh no, Vadim is gone. His brother Yefim tells us how the man returned and asked for money. Vadim refused his goons, and they carried him away. He asks us to go get Travis to help him get Vadim back. Question time. How? Fucking how? I refuse to believe that one of the 2 bar owners in town could be kidnapped and dragged away. If you've met the guy, you know damn well he went kicking and screaming. How could this have happened without anyone stopping them? Does Diamond City security not exist? Is this a normal thing to happen? The answer is the writers didn't think about it, because if you stop to think about the logistics of this, with the one-way in and the one-way out of Diamond City that is heavily fortified and buzzing with guards, it doesn't make any sense. Did they bring a fucking rope ladder and throw it over the eastern field wall and then climb over without alerting any guards? It just doesn't make any sense. We go find Travis and berate him into telling us where these people went. I find it funny that Travis doesn't know where they went, but if we just keep aggressively asking him, he somehow does know where they went. He asks us to come with him, and we can hear an audible change in his voice. I'll come back to his voice later, but for now we head out to find Vadim.
I'm on a break right now.
Shut the fuck up, Scarlett. We know you're on a break. We didn't ask. So we run out into the middle of nowhere and arrive at the brewery, which is a clever way of saying a raider den. With these guys being out here in the middle of buttfuck nowhere, where exactly did Vadim meet them? Do they come into Diamond City to drink at the bar? Because I don't remember ever seeing raiders there. Does Vadim leave his business and livelihood to go out and meet raiders places? Did he go to, I don't even know where raiders would go. I get the combat zone is the only plausible place, and I very much doubt Vadim is heading into the combat zone. Whatever. We'll move on. Travis needs a pep talk before we enter the dungeon. We give him the usual runaround. Don't fuck up, you're probably gonna die. I wish you would, but you're an essential NPC, so let's get this over with. We take out the small dungeon of raiders and find Vadim. He is happily saved. Woo-hoo. Then we speak to Travis once more. His entire demeanor has now shifted completely. Within a matter of hours, and watching a random guy slaughter about 20 raiders, he is a completely different person. His voice is deeper, and he says that he has more confidence after seeing how small the things he was worrying about were. From now on, he will be confident and cool, and the radio of Diamond City will reflect that. I do enjoy quests that have a significant change on the world, as I have mentioned already, but I find the voice change silly and tacky. I believe that if his attitude changed while his voice remained, that would just make more sense. Have him sound distinctly more confident. The new voice is so distinctly alien from the character's initial voice that it ends up feeling forced. It sounds fake. It sounds like he's putting on a facade.
Thanks, though. For helping and for...
Man, what a day, huh? Hey, listen. I wanted to say thanks.
But either way, a change is happening, and so this isn't a terrible quest. Now we have to walk the miles back to Diamond City. While on the topic of Travis, let's discuss his shack and the Diamond City radio briefly. There's not much to either. His shack is fine. It's set up like a radio studio, and I enjoy that they gave him a trailer, almost like a movie star trailer. I think there's a connection there, maybe not. Travis himself is fine. though I would expect more stuttering, anxious wrecks given the state of the world around them. Now, something I do have a problem with is the selection of songs. I won't stay on this point for too long, but the song choices are all overly focused on the bombs falling. It's just silly that almost all of the songs are about a nuclear apocalypse. Most songs are just written about love, or hardship, or loss. But Diamond City Radio cultivated the perfect playlist to ram it into your head at all times that this is a post-apocalypse and that bombs fell 200 years ago. I think it's similar to the trash heaps around town. The devs are just so amateur at writing to build the atmosphere of Fallout that they think they need to be this overt to constantly remind you that this is a post-nuclear Fallout. Travis's weak, stuttering voice is changed into a smooth, confident voice. And one positive note, people in Diamond City and Good Neighbor will mention this change. Alrighty, we helped out the radio boy, now let's get back to the shops. We step into Fallon's basement, the residential clothing store. This is a tiny shop with nothing around. The lady here, Fallon, will sell the player clothing and some chems. We dispatch the mannequins, find some loot, and head out. That's all there really is to do there. Next is Arturo's gun store. This location exists purely to facilitate the player having an armor and weapon workbench next to a man selling materials for upgrades. Arturo asks if we are the new guy in town, but besides that he functions the same as Fallon. A merchant and a merchant only. He really doesn't expand out of that box as far as being an NPC goes. That's a shame because he is an arms dealer, and arms dealers are usually very interesting people. Being an arms dealer, he also has the unique occupation to allow for many interesting quests. Similar to the quest ideas I had for Cleo in my Good Neighbor video, I think they should have had some gun-running quests here in Diamond City as well. Perhaps there are some weapons merchants who are scamming Arturo with cheap, overpriced ammunition. He needs us to pay them a visit and either bribe, threaten, or persuade them to fix the supply. And this one directly mirrors my Good Neighbor video suggestion, but what if the Good Neighbor gun store was taking all of the business? Guns and ammo should realistically be in short supply 200 years after the post-apocalypse. I doubt very many people would have access to gunpowder, lead, brass, and all the other things you need to manufacture ammo, let alone to make guns. Perhaps the player is sent to solve the problem. We could sabotage the gun store in Good Neighbor and put Cleo out of business. This allows Arturo to have full access to the gunrunner's arsenal. We could see a change in the world from this, where Good Neighbor triggermen and guards have to sheepishly come to Diamond City to buy ammo. We could see them uncomfortably walking through the Diamond City market, under the glare of the citizens. The guards could talk trash and mock them as they make quick errands for 45 ammo. Just a quest that would deal with powers at B that should exist in the world of Fallout, and a quest that gets people from different locations to have a meaningful interaction. You know, like the quests that old Fallout games had? The player could go on deliveries, but cool ones. Instead of a fetch quest, why not have a delivery quest? I need you to take this explosive auto rifle to a gunner boss in Lexington who ordered it, and the player must go find this gunner. We could kill the gunner boss and keep it for ourselves, lying to Arturo and telling him there was a power struggle and the gunners killed each other. Or we could deliver it for reals and get maybe, 1,000 caps from the gunner or some cool shit in return. Something interesting that might be a way for the player to interact with groups around the wasteland in a way that's not combat. Here's a note, since we have so many gun mods and different alterations of guns, why don't the gun merchants sell unique modifications? Modifications you could only find on unique named weapons that are sold here to turn your own personal regular guns into unique special guns. I think this is like a super basic thing they should have included. Also, if you're gonna have mods on guns and not include ammo types, first of all, big fucking mistake, bring back ammo types, then you should include some actual interesting modifications, and definitely unique modifications that you can find places. I don't know why this wasn't considered. The next store on our way is the Diamond City Surplus. It's the general store for Diamond City. This stall, similar to Arturo's gun stall, offers no quests and is fairly straightforward. It's like they say, they buy and sell for 24 hours a day. I actually really like this aspect, having a human merchant during the daytime hours and a Mr. Handy running the shop at night. It's a very immersive detail, and in a world like Fallout, with the commodities of Mr. Handy robots, this is absolutely the kind of thing I would expect to see. If you find a robot, that's extremely valuable, and you want to use that for all of its worth. And here we can see that happening. Very nice. The clerk is a shrewd woman named Myrna, the same woman Piper threatened the gate security guard with being upset about missing out on the supplies. I can absolutely see what Piper was talking about, and I can see why Danny Sullivan wouldn't want this woman having a problem with him. She asks if we are a synth, and she's over-the-top paranoid about it. If the people here really were concerned that human robots were replacing people, Myrna is the only one behaving like this is actually the case. Everyone else talks about it constantly, but behaves like it's just a story, except for Myrna. And the guy who pulled a gun on his brother, but he's not around anymore. I actually think if the devs wanted to sell the idea that people here are paranoid about synths, we would see more people being as suspicious as Myrna. Not just store owners, but everybody should have this level of suspicion if you are actually thinking that everyone you meet might be a robot here to replace you. Other than the neat detail of the Mr. Handy and the suspicion of synths, this is just the general store. There's not much more to it. Now let's grab a bite to eat and find a bed for the night. The next location we arrive at is the Noodle Stand. This may surprise you, but I like the Noodle Stand a lot. The fact that Diamond City patrons will tell you, just say yes, it's the only thing he understands, and have this be true for the robot is such a great gag NPC. But it's not purely a joke. I mean, it also makes sense within the world. A scavenged robot stuck in one programmed mode, and that is to cook noodles. That's all he's here for, and that's all he's going to do. The internet told me that the phrase he repeats roughly translates to, "What will you have?" or "May I take your order?" I just love the idea of this robot working as a line chef when the bombs fell, and he was scavenged and repaired to do his programming and feed a town. I do wish there was a little more to the Noodle Stand, perhaps some more NPCs that worked here. If all he does is make noodles, then who cleans? And who gets the noodle supplies? But that's not a big issue. The Noodle Stand is great, and it adds a lot of personality to the Diamond City marketplace. Not to mention the dialogue about the Noodle Stand we've heard from NPCs. They treat eating at the location almost as a patriotic action. Very nice details for the Noodle Stand. Before we head off to find somewhere to sleep, let's swing by that illustrious press building and see what Piper wanted from us. We head inside Public Occurrences and meet that chick we briefly met at the front gate. Let me just start by saying that is how much Piper has seen of us. She wants an interview, and since I'm covering a video on Diamond City, we acquiesce to her request. I hate everything about this interview. It is one of the most ham-fisted, railroaded, forced, shit-writer, garbage dialogue quests in Fallout. This isn't an interview. This is the writers using Piper to force the main story and their idea of the character Nate onto the player, regardless of what you'd like to do with your character in this role-playing game. In a franchise famous for having such dynamic player choices for role-playing, this interview is the embodiment of Bethesda's shit writing in this game. Piper is able to know 2 details about us that she shouldn't. There is just no way she can know the information she does. Unless she is a Bethesda Fallout character and she knows we are the main character. Piper knows more about Nate as the devs wrote him than any of our actions since the start of the game would be able to inform her. And that's not even to mention that she wouldn't know about all of our actions since the start of the game, unless she was written with the knowledge that the devs had and not the knowledge that her character would have. If we've joined a major faction, or we've become the leader of a horde of raider gangs, she doesn't know about it. But somehow right off the bat, she is able to deduce that we are from a vault. What? How often do you interact with people from vaults to be able to confidently determine who is and who isn't from a vault? How many vault dwellers has Piper met? From where? That one vault to the north? I very much doubt it. She says it's our fish out of water look. Okay, Just tell me this whole time we've had a fish out of water look that was a dead giveaway that we are a person who was raised in a subterranean community. Not only that, but this is very belittling to the player character. Like, we could very well be a psychotic murderer when we arrive at Diamond City, but somehow she knows that we're actually still just a dazed and confused fish out of water look kind of person. Why is this the case? Because Piper said so? What if you made a character who always wears a mask because they are horribly scarred? No, Piper knows you have a fish out of water look. What if you are a criminal hiding your face because... No, Piper knows you're a little bitch with a fish out of water look. I fucking hate this writing, especially for my character, who specifically has not once mentioned or made any action or dialogue option about me being from a vault. I arrived in Diamond City not mentioning I'm a father looking for my son and not in a vault suit, so why the fuck does Piper call me Blue and why does she know I'm from a vault? The next piece of information Piper is just able to manifest is the fact that we are looking for someone. But we aren't. Like, we literally aren't. I have avoided every dialogue option that says so. We are, in fact, not looking for someone. Like, literally. My player left the vault and has been doing whatever without making a single effort towards looking for the bastard Sean. In fact, I never even stopped to talk to Codsworth in Sanctuary. I just appeared in this world and have been living as a normal person ever since. But somehow, this NPC knows all about it and knows that we are looking for someone. This one is even more frustrating because she's not making a comment about our non-existent facial expression. She's actually making a statement about our goals and actions when there is zero evidence for her to base this on. This is just the perfect example of how shit these writers are, and how little they give a fuck about this franchise and why it was so popular. Piper also mentions that she will follow us, and she is now available as a follower. There is no way in hell I'd take Piper anywhere, and we head out. She did tell us to check out the detective agency to speak to the detective, Valentine. After replaying this game so many times, this time it is particularly annoying to see how hard everyone in town tries to avoid mentioning that Nick is a synth. If this town functioned at all believably, people would refer to him as the synth detective. Or they would be frequently mentioning, with all of their synth paranoia, that Valentine is an exception, that he's one of the good ones. It would be mentioned. If this world functioned with any semblance of realism, we all know that Nick Valentine's synth nature would be one of the first things we heard about him. Otherwise, with all the synth paranoia, what do you think would happen? I can tell you that if the writers did not write characters like they are aware they are in a video game, they'd definitely let you know Nick is a synth. Otherwise, the player would be expected to kill him on sight. Think about it. If our character was a real person who came into this town not knowing about synths, everyone in this town has shoved it down our throats that synths are dangerous people replacing robots from hell, aka the Institute. If they didn't tell us that Valentine was a synth, then the player would be expected to kill him on sight. Oh look, it's one of those super evil things I've been conditioned to fear and despise since I left the vault. Guess I'll just have a chat with it, even though everyone has told me the Institute is likely who took my son. Bethesda writers are just so proud of their shitty reveals, they write these ham-fisted amateur twists and force the world to awkwardly comply to reward them with their super epic writing genius subversions. Except it doesn't make sense, and it just reveals how bad they are at creating storylines and characters in a world like Fallout. Let's get the hell out of this printing room and not go check on the detective agency. Now, after all of that, here's a point of praise. There is a very good impact on the world depending on the dialogue options chosen for Piper's quest. Now, this does not veto my criticisms about the player choice. Rather, there is a good response to the choices given to you, specifically with the ending point, where our player can say revenge, peace, understanding, yada yada. Since we chose the revenge option, guards throughout town will actually mention this to us. Stuff like, hey, you're the guy from the paper. I liked that revenge line at the end. This is a very cool and immersive change to the town that I must give praise for. Bethesda writers did a good job with that aspect. Now, let's move on. While drunkenly speaking with patrons in the Dugout Inn, I met two individuals. One is Hawthorne, a local merc who has some nice dialogue. He serves as an NPC to tell you about 3 interesting locations to check out. I personally far prefer swapping stories with a fellow merc as a way to learn about interesting locations, as opposed to guards constantly just telling you about random stuff across the wasteland. On our way out, I saw a bounty board on the entryway to the bar. If ever there was a way to have kill quests for players to score some XP, this is the way to do it. There is nothing wrong with the old tried and true message board filled with offers for bounties. Let's check out the dock in town and head out to kill some ghouls. The Mega Surgery Center functions relatively straightforward. There are 2 doctors, Dr. Soon, it's spelled son but it's pronounced Soon, and Dr. Crockett. The former offers the standard medical procedures, curing radiations, chem addiction, and healing. He also sells some medical supplies and is conveniently located outside a stall with a chemistry station. If we inquire about facial reconstruction surgery, Dr. Soon will direct us downstairs begrudgingly. I do enjoy the detail that he views Dr. Crockett's work with a level of disdain. It's not real doctor work like his. He actually helps people medically. Dr. Crockett helps people's vanity. And heading downstairs is exactly what it is. This is the face sculptor for Fallout 4. 100 caps to change your face. Thank goodness it is much more economical than the 1,000 gold in Skyrim. Especially since I'm the kind of person who will change my character's face regularly, to either age them or damage them as the story goes on as a way of building my character and telling their story. Does facial reconstruction make a lot of sense in the world? No, not really. But this is the type of player cosmetic option that everybody enjoys being in the game purely for the purpose of role-playing. The Mega Surgery Center checks out. It does what it does, and it doesn't do anything more. Unfortunately, they don't offer any quests here. No quests about tainted medical supplies, or quests about people offering back-alley medical supplies that this doc wants taken out. It's just a shame. No quests about running medical supplies to an old lady who's sick and in her home. We don't discover that some of the medical compounds he is using in his medicine are tainted, or that the instructions he has are ancient and decrepit and it's actually incorrect. It's a shame. They could have added some small, interesting quests to help flesh out the doctor's office, but for what it is, it serves its purpose well. We return from clearing ghouls from a subway to find that Piper has released her newest article. It's all of the elements I discussed earlier made manifest. Pure amateur garbage. The next and final store in Diamond City's market is the drugstore, Chem I Care. This fine establishment offers a variety of substances that the townfolks would need. I enjoy this store and its patron, though since chems are sold right here in the open, it's a little strange that Goodneighbor has a reputation for being a drug den. I don't recall a chem store in Goodneighbor, only individual dealers, but Diamond City has a whole booth dedicated to it. Seems to me that Diamond City has a bigger drug presence than Goodneighbor, so I don't know where the superior Diamond City attitude is coming from. This is actually a major continuity issue with Diamond City that I will touch on multiple times throughout this video. They have the exact same amount of crime and the same, if not more, presence of chems in the city. So the Diamond City superior attitude is a facade. It's total bullshit. It comes from nothing. It is completely hypocritical. Now, do you think it's that way because the devs were making a nuanced commentary on societies and how they view each other? Or do you think that's a result of the devs being stupid? I know which one I think it is. Now let's move on. Solomon has the option to ask for work. I'm glad another clerk here offers a quest, and not a random Radiant quest, but a fetch quest that at least makes some sense within the world. He and Mo from the Swatters store offer what I consider to be the upper tier of fetch quests. They want unique items that would actually be significant to them, from a location that's not too absurdly far away. It's not great, it's not even good, but if you're going to have a fetch quest, these are better than most. We travel to a ghoul-filled swamp and collect some ferns. Now, that better be some good, and I'm talking good, icky, sticky green, for me to have gone and killed a bunch of zombies in a sunken house to get it. We return for our reward and get some free product. Now that I've visited all the shops in town, let's do a recap. I have some notes. There is a good variety of stores here in town. I appreciate the distinct functions and the number of shops. I think more stores is always better, because if there is a location safe enough and populated enough for allowed to open trade like this, then it only makes sense that people would try to make a living doing so. I am overall pleased with the kinds of shops and individuals running them, but I'm disappointed by the lack of interesting quests or actual things to do here in the Diamond City market. We don't see any rivalries between shops or shopkeepers trying to sabotage another for business. There's not even anything to do in the market. No pinball machines or, I don't know, a basketball hoop, something. Something for people to do while they're hanging out here. I think some more quests about these people and their daily interactions with one another and the caravans is a recipe for a ton of interesting quests. Hopefully, since Bethesda shat the bed so hard in Fallout 4, they can fix some of this stuff in Fallout 5 and include lots of small, seemingly insignificant interpersonal quests between individuals, not quests focused on killing monsters. Next on the docket, I bought a house. It wasn't cheap, but it was much more economical than I thought. For only 1,000 caps, you can purchase a key to the only player home in Fallout 4. Because remember, the dozens of build-it-yourself homes don't count. I've always enjoyed player homes in Bethesda games. Since Fallout never really had player homes, aside from perhaps the Lucky 38 Casino's penthouse, Bethesda games, however, have always had player homes in their larger cities, and I've always enjoyed their execution of these homes. Home plate, as far as player homes go, is alright. The Diamond City secretary explains that the last owner bought an adjacent warehouse, so there's extra room. And when we arrive, that's exactly the case. There is one shitty room connected to another smaller shitty room with stairs and a ladder. It's fine, I guess, to allow the player to make all of the furnishing themselves. I would like the option, as in Skyrim, to flat out just buy furnishings. That way you can come home to a pre-furnished, already aesthetically pleasing house. After having the player responsible for building hundreds of homes across the map and decorating them all themselves, I think they could have put in a little effort and actually decorated the player home for us. Aside from that, the house is pretty straightforward. We receive a special fast travel marker that takes us directly inside. Let me say, just from memory of how inconvenient it was to travel to Bree's home in Skyrim, what a huge convenience this is, and a great change purely from a gameplay functionality side of things. I will note that I cannot craft power generators, and the cords in the player home will not travel to the adjacent warehouse. So, you're essentially just prohibited from having power in half of your house, which I find incredibly stupid and annoying. I also cannot build gun racks, which is doubly stupid and annoying, since one of the only things I actually wanted to do in my player home was to display all of my unique guns and armor. Having display stands was one of the best parts about Skyrim's Hearthfire DLC. You had the option to build many racks and stands to display all of that unique gear you collect over the game. It's actually really cool to see it pile up as you progress and get into the late game. Weird that they have so many crafting options in settlements, but when it comes to decorating the only house you can buy in the game, there are less than half the options available. One more note that really gets under my skin is that the disposition of all of the people in Diamond City is not changed after we buy a house. We are an outsider when we first arrive. We just showed up from the wastes. We should be treated with a level of suspicion. But then, after we buy a house, these people's attitudes don't change whatsoever. They still refer to us as a dirty outsider and an untrustworthy person. I think if the devs really wanted to do something immersive, they could have changed everyone's dialogue. We are now a member of Diamond City. We are a citizen. People could treat us friendlier. There could be a sort of camaraderie between us and the guards and the citizens. But no, you are a stranger and an outsider. From the first time you walk into the game until after you've saved the world from synths and own a town and live in town, you will never be accepted into the society. I just feel like this is a very strange aspect that was overlooked. You might chalk this up to people always being suspicious of synths and that you still wouldn't be accepted into Diamond City until you were there for at least a couple generations. But I don't think the devs were smart enough for that to be the case. I think the actual case is they just didn't think about it. Now, one final note, and it's a plus and a negative, the outside, as in the roof patio area. It's great. It looks very nice. And I'm glad to see the doghouse in the extra balcony, where you can notice how many other balconies exist in Diamond City. It's funny when you look around and realize how many fake, inaccessible balconies there are in Diamond City. My only problems are that we cannot build up here, so we cannot customize our porch at all, which I find to be incredibly lame. You could have created a tiny settlement building up here with no problem. And secondly, this place is obviously set up to house dog meat with the doggy house right up here on the balcony, but you cannot actually leave dog meat here. So the one actual player house in the game is in a location you cannot send followers to or your dog to. I cannot keep my dog in the Great Green Jewel of the Commonwealth, the safest location for miles, with a home I bought, with a dog house and a bowl for him. But I cannot leave him here. It would only make sense to leave him here. He's right in town where he's safe, and then when Valentine is going to call him later for the Kellogg quest, he's actually here, not in Murkwater construction site or any other settlement across the map, and not still waiting at the Red Rocket. But I've harped on the player home enough. Let's move on. As my player sits on his balcony, I'm reminded of two side notes I hate about Fallout 4, and I don't know where else to interject them, so here they are. Why can't we wait from anywhere? When I walk out of a building and it's the dead of night, why can't I just wait in place until morning? This has been a feature of every Fallout game and every Bethesda RPG since forever, except for Fallout 4. For some reason they decided that, starting now, you would need to sit in a chair to wait, not only preventing you from conveniently waiting as you need it, but also ensuring that whenever you sit down, the button prompt will never go away. It's just a small, incompetent, dumbass change to make for literally no reason, except maybe survival mode, but then why would we have survival mode and then force these penalties into the regular game? It's just fucking stupid. Second note, why don't we see weapons on a character's exterior? One of the best elements from Fallout New Vegas, unironically, is that all of your weapons are holstered on your body. This is such a small thing, but it is so immersive. If I'm a gunslinger with a revolver, I want to see my pistol holstered at my hip when I'm not using it. I want to see my sniper slung over my back when I'm not using it. It adds so much character to the player, and it should be in the game. It's part of your aesthetic. It's a big part of role-playing. Do you walk into town with a sniper slung over your shoulder, immediately communicating that you are a dangerous sharpshooter? Or do you walk into town with a fat man on your back, telling everyone you're a maniac who's not afraid to blow us all up? And for anyone who might chalk these up to something that mods can solve, I am so sick of hearing that point. It's like if you sold a car without brake lights and you had the gall to point it out and be critical that your car you bought has no brake lights. And people could say, well, yeah, but you can go get brake lights for it. And it's like, yeah, but you sold me a car without brake lights. Yeah, but you can go get brake lights for it. Like, do you see how that doesn't actually solve the initial problem of something being lacking in the first place? Just two notes I had, one hampering gameplay functionality and one hampering roleplay functionality. We take a stroll across town to the waterfront. Let's see where Diamond City is getting its water supply. We arrive to see a Diamond City security guard talking to a bald child about the water supply. He is concerned about a health hazard, and the kid chalks this up to interfering with his money-making operation. Question time. This kid isn't the source of Diamond City's water, right? I mean, this kid is a source, but not the source of water, right? Because if it is the case that he really is the primary source of water for this entire town, then we have a case of brain-dead retardation in this writing. Let me pause on my criticisms for just a moment while we talk to this bastard. Okay, so we talked to Sheng, and he says he's been running this business by himself since he was 8. Okay, so I know this is bullshit now, right? Now, I know this NPC in particular has a lot of what we would call cute dialogue, where the writers believe they've made something just absurd enough and with just enough confidence that it's cute. That the player would smile when they see it and think, oh, this is endearing. Like this child saying he's a self-made man, taking night classes. I'll refer you once again to the retirement and the free press points of someone saying something that only has context in our modern world and makes no sense here. He's taking night classes? Okay, that's potentially possible. It's actually very not possible. We can check the schoolhouse and we can check the teacher's house. But stupid nonetheless, since degrees mean nothing here, and what education is he getting? He runs the shitty water store. It's not like there's any sort of educational boundaries in the post-apocalypse. The whole waterfront is stupid and nonsensical. I refuse to believe any town with at least somewhat competent adults would have their primary source of water come from a snarky child like this. A child who is actively selling contaminated, dirty water. I understand that there is a filter, but let's not pretend that whatever filter this is would extract the antifreeze, lead, and human waste from the water. So Shang asks us to clean the water pool for him. And he says the last person he sent down may have found a live hand grenade. It's played off for a gag, but then Diamond City has been drinking corpse water for what has to be months for a human body to decay in this kind of water that doesn't have any fish. Not only that, but that meant there was a missing person, and Diamond Security never investigated and never looked into the explosion in the waterfront that happened the day that man went missing. Why doesn't this make any sense? It's not a huge lore break, and it's not a giant world-breaking issue. It's just tacky and amateurish writing once again. And I wish Bethesda Fallout could have a little bit of seriousness and grow the fuck up a little bit. Now, he mentioned night classes, so let's check out what kind of classes are being offered here. In the one major city, in Fallout 4. We stopped by the Diamond City School. Let me begin by saying I'm very glad there is a school, as that is an important part of a society that's interested in improving itself. I'm glad to see that all these kids running around actually have a place to go, and are serving a role in their community that makes sense. I would still expect them to be working in the fields inside Diamond City and, doing their part to help their community, but having them be in school and running around is a much better change to Skyrim's permanently standing, freezing children. Now, the robot here also makes sense, but my god, do they have the horniest robot I've ever met. I seriously think there was something going on with the Bethesda devs and wanting to fuck robots. There is an absurd amount of quests in this game about robots fucking humans or wanting to. She talks non-stop about having the hots for the professor. Even her idle dialogue is inappropriate remarks about how he and she are just colleagues and nothing more. I don't know how much of a concern a sexually frustrated robot teacher is, but it's probably not having the best impact on the children. There is actually a quest here where we can help further the robot and the teacher's relationship. I think this is retarded and we're not gonna do it, but it is there. And I guess that's some nice world building for these degenerates. Aside from that, the school functions as I would expect. I'm pleasantly surprised to see a Diamond City security guard inside the school during business hours, and to hear the teacher make it clear that we shouldn't be there and that Diamond Security is very protective of this place. I would expect nothing less, and it's good to see that the devs actually put some thought into this, especially in a post-apocalypse. Your children would be your most valuable commodity. They are the most valuable thing in your life. They are the future, and your assurance that you'll be taken care of when you're old in a world like Fallout. One final note, we find the teacher's chem stash on the roof in the back of the school bus. Once again, Diamond City has absolutely no ground to stand on with being superior about the druggies over in Goodneighbor, but it is a good subtle detail in a fitting location. The teacher's gotta escape up here to get high sometimes. The kids are driving him crazy. Now, let's check out some of the other establishments around town. We head into the local science center. So remember earlier when I was talking about annoying dialogue that the writers think is cute? So we walk into one of the most forced, idle dialogue discussions ever, and are promptly offered a science lesson by Dr. Duff. She says the children are expected to arrive, but we arrived first, so she'll go ahead and give us a science lesson. Okay, so this is the presentation expected to be given to the school children later today. Alright, so far so good. She yaps about radiation, and then she asks if I'm ready for the honorary field trip. What? Are you actually giving me a fetch quest right now? I thought this was the science lesson for the children. Oh, wait, it is? Okay, so she confirms that she was going to send students on this field trip. Let me pause and say that Bethesda thinks all of this is cute, quirky dialogue. But if we approach this with a semblance of believability, this is what we are being told. This psychotic woman teaches the kids and regularly sends out students outside of the wall to specifically find dangerous mutated bugs for her. So she's just killing the kids, right? I'm not wrong when this reads as exactly that. This woman is sending children outside of the Great Green Wall to die. She even jokes about losing students from this. What? Like, actually, what? I get that it's fun to have quirky dialogue that brushes over death and horror in the post-apocalypse because that's funny, but this is asinine. I don't even need to break down how stupid this is, especially after we just came from the school where they did a good job at informing us that the lives of children here are actually valued as they should be. And then we walk across the street to the quirky doctor who jokes about regularly losing kids beyond the wall on her suicide missions. This is just amateur garbage writing. Someone thought the benefit of this goofy NPC outweighed the in-game implications that she is joking about sending children to their deaths. What the fuck, Bethesda writers? I mean, listen to her idle dialogue about the quest. These writers really believe this is just silly, funny things that doesn't really matter to the rest of the world.
There's risks.
That would explain why some students don't come back. How about 150 caps?
I look at this and I see stupid writers who have no respect for the suspension of disbelief and immersion in their game. When we are doing the yellow, orange, red for more caps, our player literally mentions the danger as a reason for more pay. So it's not like the danger of this quest didn't occur to them when they wrote this. Anyway, we accept. I accept for you guys, I should say. Let's go find that stupid fucking bug. We go on this field trip, and keep in mind that this is a task she would have given to a student if we hadn't arrived first. She says as much in her dialogue, so let's see what the kids are up to around here. We leave the Diamond City gate and run down the street. Across the tracks, we find our bloatfly. Is it absurdly far away from Diamond City? No, thankfully. Is it a distance a child could be expected to go out alone? I mean, yes, if you want them to die. It is beyond the view of any of the Diamond security guards, and is notably right next to the Hardware Town location. The Hardware Town location that we were specifically told is just outside of Diamond Security's reach and thus dangerous. The location that we were sent to that was full of actual dangerous raider NPCs. So not only are we sending kids right past that, but we are sending them out of sight of security to find a literal dangerous bug. We kill the bug, and we head back. We get some more infuriating dialogue the writers thought would be cute. She completely forgot about the field trip she sent us on. I get it. It's funny because she is an airhead and she is a scientist, so it's quirky and interesting. Except this NPC is just annoying, immersion breaking, and genuinely nothing but a negative on the entire town of Diamond City and the world of Fallout as a whole. Now, I have a theory that this woman is stealing children. It makes so much sense. She pretends to be an airhead and sends children just out of sight of the guards and out of shouting distance. She either works for a raider organization and is funneling children to them as slave labor, and she is collecting children to induct into the Institute or be used as experiments for child synths. Now, Bethesda writers are not smart enough to have thought that far ahead. To them, this is just a quirky, silly, classic Fallout-style quest, and doesn't break the immersion of the town or world at all. Either way, this level of incompetence and malicious crimes of omission from Dr. Duff is nothing but absurd. They are absurd even for the already ludicrous and unbelievable nature of Fallout 4. Even for the level of stupidity and carelessness this game is crafted with, this instance in particular stands out for how brain dead it is. Now let's move on. There are only a few more locations in this town for us to cover. The next location we check out is Diamond City's jail. I have several problems with this establishment, many of which are covered in my Good Neighbor video. The main gripe I have is this: why does the jail exist? There is no crime that can be committed that lands you in jail, so why is it here? Murder equals death on the spot. Okay, that makes sense. But what about all the other crimes? Battery is instant death, so I hope there's never any bar fights here. Oh wait, there was one, but since it was part of a quest, everyone didn't immediately pull their guns out and shoot the aggressor. Petty theft ends in instant death on the spot. Pickpocketing ends in instant death on the spot. There is no reason for there to be a jail here except to facilitate one NPC for one quest. The only reason the jail exists is for the quest, The Dig. Otherwise, it exists here just as a place for the guards to sleep. This is so many levels of stupid and lame. Why wouldn't they just include the admittedly imperfect but functional system of crime and punishment from Skyrim? It could function here perfectly, and perhaps give the player the ability to not die every time you accidentally commit a crime. Wouldn't it be nice to not have to reload a save if you accidentally steal or shoot someone? No? Yeah, I like the entire town attacking me too. And after all, it wouldn't make sense that in the one town in this entire game that is famous for being a safe and governed location, separate from the lawless hellhole outside, why would this location have any sort of process of crime and punishment? That would be immersive, functional, and make sense narratively with the unique location that Diamond City is meant to be. With all of that sense going on, it's no wonder that the devs felt the need to cut that from the game, but make sure to leave the useless jail there for no reason. Why do I keep getting the impression that these devs didn't care, didn't think about it, and didn't feel it would be noticed or that it was important? One of these has to be the case for this much stupid to be going on in one location. Let's move on. Next, we decide to seek out some repentance for our many heinous deeds, and we stop by the chapel. Now, there are some very good pros and some less bad cons to this place. I'll start with the pros. I'm very happy to see a church in Fallout. People look to God most when they are in dire situations. A place where they feel they have nowhere to turn but to the Almighty. That's just how the human brain works, regardless of your religion, and it is very fitting to find that kind of thing in Fallout. Now, the All Faiths Chapel goes all out on not picking a specific god or religion, and the not picking a god part I find absurd. If these people actually believed in a god, they wouldn't be constantly, self-consciously reminding you they are not biased or discriminating between which specific god it is. I think this is so stupid and plays into the whole concept of these writers writing it from a modern perspective, without thinking about how people in this environment would actually function. We could start by looking at this from an adult's perspective, and not the childish, simplistic view of religions worshipping different gods. I get it. They didn't want to say the Muslim god, or the Christian god, or the Hindu god, so we'll just never stop mentioning how cool we are for worshipping whichever god you please. Instead of just saying, if there is a God, then it wouldn't matter which religion you follow as long as you're praying to God and trying to amend your flaws. If the whole point of religion and its function in a society is to encourage people to be better and give them something to pray for, to strength, and to help with their daily lives, then there doesn't really need to be this focus on whichever god you want. Because Diamond City isn't 2015 Twitter, and there clearly isn't a competition between religions here. I understand that this is their way of appealing to all religions, which is more for the player than any sense of immersion. It's supposed to come off as approachable and down to earth. This man isn't proselytizing to you, he's offering you a place of peace and comfort from the harsh wastelands. That's fine, but by constantly having the pastor, the man of God, saying he's not sure which god you're praying to, and you can pray to whomever, it doesn't make him seem approachable, but rather unsure of himself. And that's not what you want out of a religious leader. I get what they were going for, but I think it has more of a negative effect on the world than if they had just said God, blanket statement, with no inkling of which religious practice they specifically follow. Because as it functions, it seems like the priest is self-conscious or straight up doesn't believe the message he's peddling. You can't really offer people God and then make it clear that you can pray to whichever God you want, because then it makes it seem like the prayer isn't going to matter. If I can pray to any of the gods and it doesn't matter which one, then that puts doubt into which gods are real and which ones aren't. I mean, which ones are going to answer my prayers. And if one of those gods should happen to not be real, then how do you know which one is real? I don't mean to get into the weeds of how religion works. I'm just trying to say that this is a very poor choice of creating the one church in the Commonwealth. You could have at least gone the Fallout 3 way and just had people worshipping radiation and worshipping a nuke in town. Don't add a nuke, that was fucking stupid, but I mean at least have a simple Fallout type religion, if you're so self-conscious about including a real world God religion. I'm also very disappointed with the lack of charity or things happening in this church. Your town has a church. That's notable in this game already. But what does it do? It offers you an experience bonus if you sit down and pray, and that's cool, but nothing else. Having a church in a settlement would make a huge difference from not having a church in the settlement, and the game does nothing to recognize that. I mean, you could have at least had weddings like we see in the church in the town of Modoc from Fallout 2. I believe in the writers' efforts to be inoffensive, they went too far, and they neutered the entire idea into a bland and unimpactful bit of mediocre flavor in Diamond City. I can only speak for myself, but in the world of Fallout, I'd always rather have a fanatical zealot than people who are only half invested in their faith or beliefs. I think the Wasteland would ensure that the former was more frequently encountered, and the world of Fallout should reflect that. But also, give some work to the church. This is a good place to have some interesting quests. Why not have the church give out missions? Bring some food to this needy family. Bring some flowers to an old lady. Go and meet with a sick person. Go do some actual charity work and be a good Samaritan. Maybe if people wrote the priest with the slightest hint of passion for God, he could get a little fanatical. We need more holy water. Go extort the water merchant boy for his finest water. Or maybe something like, there are some non-believers in the upper stands. Go proselytize to them, and don't come back until they agree to come to the Sunday service, by any means necessary. Something like, someone forgot to pay their tithes this month, and you need to go and extort this payment for them. Remember, it's not for you, it's not for the pastor. This is God they're holding out on. You could write some great quests for a religious group. They are often the easiest to write, since human greed and selling literal salvation go hand in hand. I'm severely disappointed with how bland and inoffensive they tried to make the church. As it stands, it's just a building of nothing that offers nothing but a slight XP boost. No quests, no interesting dialogue, and no God. Let's move on. Diamond City has an absurd amount of wasted space. Not only is its population pitifully small for what this town is said to be and referenced as by NPCs around the world, but there are barely any homes. Diamond City has a great aesthetic, but it is cleverly deceptive. It appears like there is more going on and more houses than there actually are. This is something that all Fallout games have done before, as I've discussed in my Good Neighbor video. Fallout games often use this little trick, where they include many mock houses, just bare bones houses that look to the player like any other house, purely there to give the illusion that there are more people and places than there really are. This, to my understanding, has always been an effort to work around engine limitations, trying to make it seem like there are more people than the engine will actually allow. This is by no means a problem or a bad thing. It's actually a really smart way of making the world more immersive for minimal drag on your console. But Diamond City does this poorly. We see houses with upstairs and balconies that are not actually anything. If we get to the highest point and look around, we can see just how much space is wasted here. In the one major town in this game, where there are supposedly hundreds, if not thousands of people, the last safe haven from the primitive wastes, with everyone crowded here trying to make a living, and we see this. So we have Kellogg's house over here. There's one dummy house, the one fake house in all of Diamond City. There's an entire walkway made from precious steel bars and taking up a large portion of the stands to facilitate this one empty house. This is just so silly. There's a playground in the ruins that we never see kids use. I guess it's just the creepy ghost corner of Diamond City. Could have had a quest about how the kids don't even go here because they hear whispers of a little girl and it's spooky. Find out a kid was murdered here or something. Maybe a little girl when the ghouls were kicked out. A little ghoul girl was killed in the playground as she tried to hide. Maybe you find her cursed teddy bear and it's still in the playhouse. You take it to her family in Good Neighbor, or maybe in the Slog where all the other ghouls that were kicked out live, and you solve the quest, putting her spirit to rest. I don't know, just a simple idea, something to give some character or use to this corner. Moving to the right, we have a stage that was used once. Then behind the waterfront, there is like a quarter of the lower stands completely empty. They could have added a row of dummy houses and a pathway up there leading to nothing, and it would have looked much better. Maybe even put in more than minimal effort and actually make a couple more houses. Have this be the super poor section. Maybe it's a bit more shady over there. People talk about how those in the east side of the stands are poor and unfriendly. This is where the refugees come to live. Not those born and raised in Diamond City, but those that managed to make it here from the wastes. Here are some examples of earlier game quests when you first arrive at Diamond City. It is a small refuge from the outside world, with every possible space being occupied in the population's desperate plight against raiders, monsters, and the elements. A place to gather settlers. Maybe instead of relying on random people to arrive at your settlements, you could find them here in Diamond City. If the game wants you to go build settlements so bad, why not have an overcrowding population in Diamond City? There are too many people. Since this is the only city that's not a crime-ridden slum, everybody comes here. Talk about food shortages and a lack of trade due to people needing more than caravans can supply. Maybe that kid selling disgusting water sells it to these poor people because they can only afford the barely purified water. Have this be something of contention for the poor people, angry that they get the less clean water. Shang is eager to capitalize on the opportunity, showing that he's willing to make a profit off of these people's suffering. Have a quest where people are feuding. You could have dozens of feud quests over things. There are so many possibilities with this idea of a refugee camp overpopulating the city, and these people will never stop pouring in from the wastes. The overcrowding is a recipe for a plethora of interesting conflicts. In the end, these people will need a permanent place to live. The player could go out and find locations for them to make a settlement, and return to ferry the people to their new settlements in an armed escort. This could be a whole new layer of depth to the settlements, and a new aspect to the core gameplay loop of Fallout 4. Maybe you arrive in Diamond City, people are overpopulated, they need a place to stay, there's all these migrants. Go out, clear a settlement, come back, tell the people, maybe even picking who gets to go and who has to stay, and then walk them over and keep them safe from any monsters along the way. That just seems like a much more sensible and realistic gameplay loop to facilitate the settlements, as opposed to Preston Garvey just sending you all over the map and random people just manifesting in the middle of the wilderness. There's also so many opportunities for role-playing here. Does your character aid the people of Diamond City? Do you help the poor folks, offer them a better place to live, and work with the powerful people in Diamond City to make life better for those that stay? Or does your character align themselves with powerful people, working to extradite as much worth from these poor people as possible? Work to make conditions even worse while benefiting the born and raised civilians and filling the pockets of your allies in the upper stands. Increase the price of food and medicine, impose a tax on them for not being citizens. Bar the poor from using the same water or medical centers. Maybe they're not allowed to be in the bars, and this causes riots outside of the bars. You could even do this in an effort to force them to move to your work camps. I mean your settlements. Maybe a Brahmin is killed, and the townsfolk blame the poor East Side people for doing it. They say they are selfish and deceptive, killing and stealing the Brahmin. Maybe the East Side folks say that it was set up to frame them, and if it wasn't set up, then someone would only kill the Brahmin if they were truly starving. Maybe someone was only trying to feed their kids. It's up to the player to find a solution to this. Do you work with the East Side folks to make the Diamond City security treat them more fairly? Perhaps they are being treated like raiders or freeloaders, or being treated like ghouls by the civilians and security alike. Do you instead work with the Diamond City security and feed their bias that these people are dangerous and untrustworthy? Perhaps we instigate a problem or frame the poor people for committing a crime and use the opportunity as means to have a shootout with the East Side people. I could keep going. There are just so many stories you could write when you have groups fighting on different economic levels. Not only that, but in a dire situation like the post-apocalypse, resources like food, water, and medicine would be a major concern and factor in the conflicts, just like living space would be. A solution like this, adding all of these quests I just mentioned, or coming up with good ones on your own, would not only solve the wasted space in Diamond City, it would not only solve the question of where settlers come from, it would not only give an immersive reason and story elements to the settlements beyond Preston manifesting locations and starving people. More than that, it would actually give Diamond City something interesting going on. This town has a terrible lack of things happening. It has no central story going on. One of the things that Skyrim actually did really, really well was have each town be the center of a miniature plotline that surrounded the town on a larger scale. Dawnstar had the Nightmare quest, something that was affecting the whole town. That quest is the bar to being able to purchase a house in that keep. It was important to the entire town's population, and that town's vibe is uniquely centered around that quest to an extent. Falkreath had the Werewolf quest as its main town quest. A werewolf townsperson killed a girl and it affected the whole town. That quest is an expression of the vibe of Falkreath, being a spooky werewolf wooded town. Morthal, in the cold northern swamps, had a quest about vampires. A house was burned down with mysterious circumstances surrounding it, only to uncover a coven of vampires with a covert agent inside the town already. Other towns had major guilds to form their main quest. Whiterun had the Companions, Riften had the Thieves Guild, Windhelm has the Butcher quest, Markarth has the Forsworn quest. These miniature quest lines or faction lines are so much a part of the identity of each of these towns. They are almost the storyline for each of these towns, separate from the major storyline encompassing them all. And these were also done so well and done to such a level that you literally associate the quest with the town. I didn't have to look a single one of these up. These all came right from my head, and I haven't really put time into Skyrim in at least 5 years. So that says something about those quests. Diamond City has none of these. They did not take the New Vegas route of creating multiple factions within a city that are all vying for power against one another, putting the player in a position to move these powers in whatever way your player choice desires. Well, second best is the Skyrim approach, but Diamond City doesn't even have an overarching plot line. The closest it gets is the main story with Valentine, and the main story sucks. There is no major event that affects everyone here. There isn't one major concern here that we are able to solve outside of the main story, which leads to the feeling that Diamond City doesn't have a lot going on. And furthermore, to the view that Diamond City is a stagnant nothing for the world. There is nothing going on here except buying and selling for the player. What do they care about? What is a central concern for the people here? The only answer is the Institute. And aside from the main story that dips into Diamond City several times, what does the player do about the Institute problem here? Nothing. Because there is nothing going on in the one city in this game. It's fucking pathetic. So when we really look at it, Diamond City has less population, less impact, and less events taking place than a minor hold in Skyrim. There are 2 quests in Diamond City that offer any meaningful player choice, and those are Painting the Wall and Diamond City Blues. Every other quest is just a straight line of progression with 0 choices for the player to make other than the one offered. everything is effectively unchangeable. I think one of the most key elements of Fallout games and player choice is the ability to change the world around us based on our choices. To change the power structure, change the lives of people, change the status quo. So it should go without saying that no change is an objectively bad thing for a role-playing game to have in my view. Now, there are only a handful of establishments left to cover, so let's move on. Next, let's talk about the upper stands. I've accumulated enough caps to not be poor, and I've decided to enjoy some of the high life in the upper stands. We hear so much about the upper stands. We can hear about the latest hairstyles available from the upper stands, and we can hear about the amount of clothing they are able to buy from the clothier Fallon. Surprise, surprise, I think this entire portion of Diamond City was executed with the finesse of a paralyzed paraplegic figure skater. Let's start with the basics. So Diamond City has a small upper-class bourgeoisie who are snooty and look down on the lower people from both a philosophical, economical, and physical level. Okay, sounds good so far. There would naturally be a top class in any society, and this is them. How is this executed? There's like 4 rich people in the entire town. There's the Latimer father and son, and then there is one bitchy blonde old lady, another old lady, a snooty robot, and then one guy with white hair. And that's really it for the upper stands. That's the upper class of an entire city. 5 people. What else is in the upper stands? Well, there's one guy with a bar that serves one woman, I guess, if that counts. We don't even know what these people do to live up here, unless we do some digging. But I've done some digging, and I still have no fucking idea what these people do and why they're somehow so influential. So there is an almost non-existent group of 5 people who live up here and have no impact on the world aside from being rich and snobby all the time. I'm sorry, these people are setting the fashion trends in Diamond City? That's what the barber and clothier would have us believe, except this is a group of old people. Old people who just dress in pre-war suits and dresses. What fashion trend is this? And if that's the case, why isn't anyone in Diamond City actually copying it? I'm beginning to suspect that the fashion trend might just be a load of shit. If we are to believe that these people are at all influential, then why don't we hear about any of them? Why do I not know what any of them do for a living without doing Diamond City Blues or looking on the Fallout wiki? For being the bourgeoisie of Diamond City, these people are so lame. Their dialogue is over-the-top playground insult levels of pretentiousness.
Filth down in the lower houses? I wouldn't keep my worst Brahmin in one. Only good for lesser men who have no value.
Who talks like this? It's a couple of old people and a robot butler on a shitty balcony, eating shitty prison food from shitty prison trays and rusty lawn tables. No personal security force, no comfy chairs, no beautiful women, no company whatsoever, no messenger running information to the CEO of the company. This guy is rich by being rich and just sits here being rich. It's such a waste of NPCs and a misuse of having a top class in your society in a video game. And I cannot look over how childish these fucking lines are. Literally, the robot goes, "I'm detecting such low levels of class. Oh, I guess I'll serve you."
Oh, my programming dictates that I serve all customers in the colonial tap house, even those that obviously don't belong. Just know that my sensors indicate that you have dangerously low levels of class for this establishment.
It's so fucking stupid and forced. What is this? The writers could actually try to tell stories with their world. Speaking of which, let's take a look at their homes. Well, the Latimers might have the coolest house in the Commonwealth. Looks like a bougie Commonwealth Playboy mansion. The old lady Eustace has some cats. An absurd amount of cats. To be fair, if you've ever had cats, they tend to make more, and I doubt there's a good veterinarian in Diamond City who could fix them safely. Or the old lady just doesn't mind. Either way, that's a lot of cats. Next is Henry Cook's house. He has a nice little pad, nothing particularly interesting. Then we have Mr. whatever the fuck his name was. Once again, nothing really interesting. I will note that everyone in this city has Jet and other chems at their bedside. So once again, I don't know where this high and mighty attitude in regards to Good Neighbor comes from. Are we to believe that the people of Diamond City are all just hypocrites when they talk about how chem and crime-filled Good Neighbor is? Or were the devs just thoughtless and did not consider their placement of loot and its relevance to the lore of the same game? I'd vote for the latter, since a genuine lack of effort or understanding seems to be the through line of Fallout 4. Alright, let's take a moment and talk about the food. This may surprise you, but one of the things Diamond City does very well is show how people get food. We see a large portion of the town dedicated solely to food acquisition, and this is a great thing to see. There is produce planted by the waterfront in 2 communal farms where we can see residents working. There are also Brahmin here that would be reproducing and eating the harvested produce in a nice cycle of food production. There is also a greenhouse next to the detective agency, with more food being grown. This is great. Something I went over in depth in my Assassin's Creed video is the importance of showing how people are able to live where they live. If people live in a location, there is always a means for them to survive there, and we can see that here. It's very immersive. The people of Diamond City would need to be producing food, especially with their tendency to close the gates and block all trade. Next will be a segment where I break into the homes of every one of these individuals and see what secrets Diamond City has to offer. Hopefully we uncover some dark and mysterious schemes. The first home is the home of the butcher girl, Polly. We check her terminal and we can find that she writes rather beautiful poetry. She discusses her sorrow at the loss of Brahmin, but understands it is necessary that they die to feed people. This paints an interesting picture of what would appear to just be a grizzled butcher. Rather, she is a soft-hearted woman with a cold exterior. Inside, she cares deeply for animals and is saddened at their loss. Alright, well, surprisingly good stuff so far. Meat locker on the roof, and that's it for Polly's house. Next we go into Earl Sterling's house, and there is absolutely nothing notable inside. Then there is a warehouse filled with guns and ammunition. Alright, right on. Makes sense for it to be here. No skeletons in the closet. Let's keep going. Next is Dr. Soon's house. Nothing out of the ordinary, though I'll note he may be a British colonial sympathizer. Actually, while we're looking at this British outfit, I gotta say, I've always been a fan of the red coat getup. It looks so fucking cool, and it pisses me off to no end that we see like 50 mannequins wearing these outfits, and you can never get it in the game. Like, I want to run around with the Minutemen dressed up like the Redcoats, all terry-ho, running up and down the fucking hills with bayonets. That would be awesome. Why didn't they give us that armor? God damn it. Now, one interesting thing is that we can see he clearly drinks away his evenings. No doubt the stress of having such a large responsibility for this town, and the frustrations of Doc Crocker doing nothing to help him. Fitting that the next house is the very same Doc Crocker, the facial reconstruction surgeon. His house is a fairly normal house as well. He does have a terminal with several entries. In this terminal, he speaks about clients. None are particularly outlandish. He just talks about different people who have needed work done throughout town. Onto the roof for a view of the waterfront, and that's it for Doc Crocker's house. I was hoping to find a body, or hear the story of a neck lift botch job, where he accidentally slit someone's turkey neck and had to hide the body. Anyway, we can move on. The next house we check out is Shang's, the boy who sells water. His house has nothing but a bunch of water. No diary to dead mom, no relic from the past, no poster of anyone he looks up to, no 6-month business plan, whatever. Let's go find the next house. Then we stop into Myrna's house. Finally, something interesting. Myrna's terminal has some of her paranoid thoughts written down. She has a list of suspected synths, and I really enjoy this being here. This is the type of thing I'd expect to actually find in the homes of paranoid Diamond City patrons. After Myrna's house is the arms dealer Arturo's house. His house has nothing particularly interesting, just some gun stuff. There is a mini-nuke here, so you can get one early on. That's about it for these houses. Poetry and paranoid diary entries seem to be the best things available in the lower stands, as far as interesting content goes. Moe's house is next door, and it's about what I expect. The worship and veneration of all things baseball in a lonely alcoholic's shack. Once again, nothing particularly interesting. We head into Solomon, the chem dealer's house. It's just a shack shithole filled with chems, which is about what I would expect. They didn't even throw some plants in there, just slop floors. After checking out all of the homes in the lower stands, we take a break to fulfill a contract here in town. One of the few acceptable ways to give players fetch or kill quests is this, by having a message board with a bounty. We find one to kill some raiders not too far away from Diamond City, in a place called Backstreet Apparel. Given the fact that this message board was so close to Fallon's clothing store, I assume it is Fallon who put this bounty on them, since these raiders are holed up in a clothing store that would probably have some clothing for Fallon. Though I would hope that she was making her own clothes and people really weren't scavenging 200-year-old clothing. Let's actually just have a look through the available quests according to the wiki, because this is the best place I can go for information on this game. There is nothing in this town, and it is so sad. Not only that, but the seemingly random locations the guards will mention, like the combat zone, the Museum of Witchcraft, and all the rest, count as Diamond City quests. As in, hearing it mentioned here, and then going out to find a self-contained quest with nothing to do with Diamond City, is considered a Diamond City quest because you will only get this prompt from the guards in Diamond City. Well, we've covered about all of these in our video, and there's only a couple that we won't cover, and I will mention them later on. But please, dear viewer, go run around New Reno. You will not run out of things to do for a very long time. God forbid you open the Fallout game Bethesda fans hate, the Satan of Fallout. You know, the one we all secretly worship, the only game we ever play. Yeah, Fallout New Vegas. If you were to go to the Strip or to Freeside, you would see many separate groups vying for power and trying to get a leg up on one another. We see different social classes and people treated differently based on their economic and social place. We see criminals and honest patrons alike. We see none of that in Diamond City. No conglomeration of water merchants feuding with the food merchants. No poor districts fighting against the rich districts. No public mayhem breaking out from synth paranoia, except for that one time Riley got shot and was never mentioned again. No secret plot to overthrow Mayor McDonough and reestablish good terms with Good Neighbor. No secret societies in Diamond City, no gangs, no clubs, and no factions. Just a bland pile of mediocrity in Fallout paint. Hoping the player is too satisfied with all the superfluous busywork to notice that this town is devoid of any interesting activity. Now, let's move on. Alright, I suppose we can't go much further into Diamond City without finally acknowledging the main quest. Let's go to the super cool detective agency. Alright, this is main quest stuff, so it should be really, really good, right? The main quest should be a showcase of the writer's very best applications of their skill and the engine limitations they are working within. I mean, the main story is what it's all about, right? We walk into the detective agency and see this slouching degenerate Ellie Perkins, giving sad dialogue that Nick is missing. Now, I already covered how monumentally stupid it is that nobody informs us we're going to be saving a synth, because Bethesda writers craft twists in their stories like illiterate children, so I won't be covering it again. Instead, let's talk about the unnatural flow of this terrible dialogue. I've spoken about this in other videos, I don't remember which ones, but Bethesda has this strange ability to write dialogue so terribly that NPCs basically skip information and then expect you to know the information they skipped. It's tricky to explain, but essentially the NPC has a set path for the dialogue, a set path you're expected to follow. This is 100% of the time the X or the A option. It's the straightforward yes, the generic base response of kindness and accepting all quests. Since the devs expect you to take this choice, they'll often write the response dialogue, You know, the dialogue with further information about the quest to coincide with that first choice. If we do not pick that first choice and then initiate conversation afterwards, the NPC continues as if they had given us all of the pertinent information, while the player is hearing their recap information without ever hearing the initial bit. It's stupid. It's a crazy problem. It's a problem you'd only have if you wrote this stupidly, if you wrote it without having clear dialogue laid out, and if you wrote it like dialogue has never been written in Fallout before now. Ellie never mentioned Park Street Station because I did not click the initial yes option. But as soon as I clicked on her again, her idle dialogue is immediately, "Oh, so you're ready to go to Park Street Station," before ever mentioning it in the first place. Is it game breaking? No. Is it immersion breaking? Yes. This isn't how people talk. Who talks like this? This is just another manifestation of mediocre, amateurish writing. And I will continue to criticize it because we've seen better writing in this franchise 17 years before this almost 10-year-old game. Writing is timeless, and garbage writing makes for timeless mistakes. Now we begrudgingly accept this quest. One interesting note, if we ask Ellie about Skinny Malone, she will give a brief spiel about Good Neighbor. I wish I had included this in my Good Neighbor video, since it is once again a showcase of the non-existent gangster slum we hear more about here. She says Skinny Malone is from Good Neighbor, and he's a suit-wearing crook. Except you will literally never hear about Skinny Malone in Good Neighbor. He doesn't exist in this world except to facilitate this quest. And if you've seen any of my videos, you know how much I hate phony world building purely for lame and unimpactful payoffs. Why does Ellie think I can free Nick from Park Street Station? Let's take a moment and think about how crazy that is. We walk in and ask for a detective, meaning that we are clearly someone who needs help. And she says, "Oh, yeah? Oh, you need help? Oh, okay. Go free the guy you need help from. He's in a dangerous mobster lair filled with guns and criminals. Go on, guy who needs help. Go fucking fight through a fucking subway of junkies." It's fucking stupid. This doesn't make any sense. This seems like a rather extreme ask for a total stranger. Bethesda writers could exercise the slightest bit of restraint and have the player initiate going to find him. Which sounds more believable? A detective's assistant asks a stranger to go clear out a subway full of mobsters with Tommy guns, or that a stranger walks in, finds out the man he is looking for has been captured, and then offers to go get the man because he was looking for the man in the first place. One of those is much more likely, accounts for player choice, and makes more sense within the world. It also shows that we are a caring character who takes action in the face of trouble. But instead, we just play the passive Bethesda bitch who gets to say yes and go on this theme park ride of mediocre story beats and forced dialogue. Alright, so we say yes, we don't murder Ellie out of frustration, and we head out to find the totally not synth detective. We travel the street and arrive at Park Street Station. I must begrudgingly offer praise where it's due. It's the small things that count, and I'm always looking out for the small things, positive and negative. And here is a good small thing. The Freedom Trail for the Railroad's questline happens to be exactly where this quest takes us. Except it doesn't happen to be. A game designer decided to put the main story dungeon that the player will be heading to early at the same location as the starting point for the railroad quest. That is a very smart thing to do. Players are likely to check out the railroad from this quest point. It's a nice way to put the player in a specific place in a way that makes sense. Also, just before Nick Valentine's detective agency, where we see the Diamond City civilians who first mention the railroad and give the player the miscellaneous objective to follow the Freedom Trail. So we would not only have arrived here, but received the prompt to do so just before receiving Valentine's quest, which would take us here. This is a very, very good and actually subtle way of directing the player to the railroad. Whoever this Bethesda dev was, great job, dude. We head through the dungeon. It's a normal affair, just 50 triggermen guarding a subway that holds no strategic or economic significance. Yep, sounds like Bethesda. Then we arrive at where Nick is, and once again they are going out of their way to hide the fact that he is a synth. Now once we arrive, Nick will make our situation sound desperate, saying we better get that gate open in 3 minutes or else there will be trouble. Here's an example of some garbage writing. Don't give the player an ultimatum unless you intend on fulfilling your threat. We wait 3 minutes, which the devs obviously didn't expect us to do, and surprise, surprise, nobody arrives. We have our meeting where Nick steps from the shadows and oh my goodness, what a subversion. This is not what I anticipated. I stepped into the room and I said, where's my human detective? Oh my word, what a shock, what a surprise. I'm baffled, I'm boggled and bewildered. I've been had, I've been bamboozled. Fuck these tacky writers and fuck these garbage, lowbrow, amateur payoffs. Side note, while I'm being negative, I hate Nick's look. I think it looks terrible. He's half robot and half machine, in a deteriorated way, but he looks soggy, like he just came from a river. His face moves normally, but the robot exoskeleton doesn't move at all, so it just looks like they shittily removed portions of a regular NPC's face, because that is what they did, but then they didn't map the exoskeleton below it, or at least have the jaw move a little bit when he's talking. So it looks weird. It looks like his normal face is moving under a completely unmoving jaw somehow. And he's smoking a cigarette. I understand how it looks cool, and I understand how it plays into the detective aesthetic and the trench coats. And don't get me wrong, guys, smoking is cool, but this just doesn't make sense. I mean, does he get a buzz? Does his body metabolize nicotine or tobacco? I mean, does this work with booze? I think if anything, the one that would work would be booze, because he would actually have a stomach cavity and maybe not have lungs that function the same as a real human's. But even then, the synth using substances just doesn't make sense. But don't let this criticism take away from how shit his character design is. Why not have Nick have half a face, go Two-Face with it from Batman, or have most of a face but robotic elements poking through? Have a terrible gunshot that reveals a portion of a robot beneath. The glowing robotic eyes are nice, but maybe one real eye and one robot eye. Maybe have him look like the T-800 when he starts peeling off the flesh exterior. Something better than this. Okay, so we have a brief dialogue, even though he told us the situation was dire and we must leave now. He will stop to have a nice chat over a crisp cigarette after we open the door. That doesn't make any sense. We follow Nick down some tunnels and arrive at the antithesis of player choice. Now, this is something that has been discussed at length by many other channels, and so I won't go too far into it. But it boils down to this. In my role-playing game, I have a character who is unbelievably good at picking locks with a bobby pin and a screwdriver that I literally cannot break a bobby pin while doing so. And yet, we arrive at a door that cannot be opened by anyone or anything until Nick arrives. The devs have crafted a scenario in which the player is fully stopped by the world until the designated NPC arrives. This is one of the most perfect examples of these garbage, mediocre writers creating a roller coaster of scenes for the player to go through and not allowing any player choice whatsoever. Fuck your player for speccing into lockpicking. You can't open the door. You cannot go in without Nick. You cannot continue the quest unless it is the way the devs want. The main story for this game is locked here until Nick comes to open the door. It doesn't go any deeper than that, really. This is just what the devs wanted. In this game, in a franchise lauded and praised for the incredible amount of player choice, the devs decided that wasn't what they wanted. Instead, what they wanted was for you to engage with their story on their terms and have to do it their way or not at all. Fucking pitiful. Now let's get through this abortion of a quest. We reach another permalock door that only Nick can open, because when it rains it pours, I guess. And then we exit the vault. We have a bit of mediocre dialogue we love so much. Nick asks how we found him. The response doesn't matter, but we say don't worry about it. And then Nick initiates a dialogue about our missing person, only to tell us we need to talk at his office. Not here. Where we are. In an alley. Clear of danger. More safe than the talking we did in the actual dangerous vault we were just in. He says a thorough investigation takes time. Okay, and we have time here. I'm so sick of these fake time constraints Nick keeps arbitrarily putting down. They don't exist. It's just these shitty writers' way of trying to keep the plot moving. These writers are so fucking bad at their job that they have to keep throwing in fake motivation to try to push you through this garbage as fast as possible so you don't have time to just sit down and think about the bullshit you're going through. No, we can't stop here to talk. We need to travel back to the quest location where we've written the conversation happening. But when you've played through this main story a dozen times, and you know all of the main events, and you know how pointless this is, you know we don't need to be in his office. The devs just wanted it there. Nothing specific occurs in that office that dictates us being there, except for Ellie pulling out the Kellogg file. We could have had the whole question and answer right here. And then he could have suspected Kellogg and then checked on the file when we got back to Diamond City, which we could then go check on Kellogg's house, which is also in Diamond City. And it would make perfect sense that way. It's like they chose the way that made the least sense. I mean, I just killed dozens of men. I just murdered dozens of men and single-handedly saves this guy's life. The least he could owe me is an immediate conversation about what I need in return. That's not crazy to ask, but the game acts as if we can only do one overblown, clumsy step at a time. No, don't talk here where it makes sense. Run back to HQ for a conversation where you will immediately get up and leave the HQ. If we follow Nick, he will have some decent dialogue about the city. And then, get this, we run in silence, 4 minutes, back to Diamond City. Since the devs clearly don't care about player agency with their voiced protagonist, you could have had Nick and Nate go back and forth about Kellogg while running. If the writing is going to be uncompelling garbage, then at least don't compound the issue by having it be inconvenient as well. We follow him in silence through Diamond City and back to his HQ detective agency. We sit through one of the most patronizing, cheesy, fucking Saturday morning cartoon story beats I've ever seen. Just listen to this.
You keep laughing at death. Someday, death's gonna laugh back.
Not as long as I got a few friends to back me up.
This is the most cringe, fucking lame dialogue I have ever seen. Like, this hurts to listen to. Okay, we sit through what is actually in the top 3 terrible moments in Fallout 4. The interview. This is the most blatantly railroaded, forced conversation in the entire game. Nick will ask us a series of questions, and there is a right dialogue for each line. In most cases, besides I think 2, the conversation will only progress when we've chosen the right answer, meaning the other 3 are just filler answers. But also, if you should pick the main one first without knowing, then you miss out on all of the other dialogue from the other 3, but you would never know this unless you played through the quest already. It is the absolute worst of both worlds, because even if you pick all of the right dialogue options and get through it quickly, when you start walking with Nick after, he's going to be mentioning facts that he only brought up in the other dialogue options. Fucking thoughtless shit writers. That is the only answer for this. Worse than that is our characters bitching and moaning and heartfelt emotions during the lines. The player has a choice over none of this. We cannot be a furious father dead set on blood revenge, nor can we be diplomatic or uncaring about our son. We must be this pathetic, sad husk of a man whose voice is breaking up talking to the robot detective. Fuck Nate, and fuck these writers. The railroaded conversation leads to describing our kidnappers. One was bald with a scar on the left side of his face. Okay, so half the fucking wasteland and half the raiders we've seen. but Nick just happens to know it was Kellogg, and he happens to be right. I think a bald, scarred guy with a pistol and a gravelly voice could apply to at least half of the wasteland. Nick doesn't question if it was a ghoul either, and all of those descriptions from a pre-war person would match a ghoul as well. See, it's not a problem that we describe Kellogg, and it's not a problem that Nick knows about Kellogg. The problem is that this is the most convenient 1 in a million chance that the bald-scarred person from across the Commonwealth, months, potentially years ago, is the same person Nick knows. But the convenience of the story is what we call contrived, wherein the world bends to the will of the writers because that's the way they want it to be, even when it really shouldn't. And you might say, well, the fact that this is 1 in a million is why it's the main story. And to that I'd say, just fucking write better. Alright, so then we stand up and go look at Kellogg's house. The only one on the entire west side of the stands. But before we can even leave, Ellie opens her whore mouth and says some dumb shit. She points out that Kellogg's house is in the west side of the stands. And she says, and I shit you not, the guards don't really go there. Be careful.
Security doesn't really go to that part of town, but you two should still be careful.
I am sorry. What? The guards don't go over there? Is the one house clearly visible on the one walkway crafted for it a sketchy part of town? Am I to believe that adjacent to the guards' headquarters, the prison, the center from which they operate, is a place the guards don't go often? What is this amateur garbage writing? We just had to interject some bullshit cliche line about how it's a dangerous part of town, be careful, when it's the one fucking house by itself, clearly visible from half the town and directly adjacent to the guards' HQ. I mean, it really feels like the Bethesda writers won the retarded nonsensical bullshit writing award and got to make this game as a prize. Why is this line here? The only purpose it serves is to falsely foreshadow some vague notion of potential danger ahead. But it's not the case. So all it does is kill my immersion with these stupid fucking Marvel movie dialogue lines. What the fuck is this writing? Alright, so we follow Nick out and walk across the stands to the one house in the western stands. But before more stupidity happens, we have to stop and talk briefly about something really stupid. Listen to this line from Nick as we are walking to Kellogg's house.
Leading a small team to kidnap a baby and leaving one of the parents alive for later? Not many mercs in the Commonwealth can pull that off.
Not many mercs in the Commonwealth could pull that off? What? Murdering a parent and taking their baby without murdering the other parent? That's not something a lot of mercs could pull off? That sounds like the easiest thing to pull off. That's just a botched kidnapping. Kill a parent, take the baby, leave the other. Why did the writers think this would make sense? Why would that be something at all notable in the post-apocalyptic world of Fallout? That's just a regular kidnapping, with the specific note of they killed one parent. This is the kind of terrible, senseless writing that is so often overlooked because it is sandwiched between terrible quest objectives and other nonsense. I just had to stop and point out how fucking stupid this dialogue is. Now let's get back to Kellogg's front door. This lock is extremely difficult to pick, but now, for plot reasons, Nick can't pick it. How does this matter with the forced lock picking earlier? It doesn't make sense. We have options here though, and I love options in my role-playing game. We can either pick the lock ourselves or go speak with the secretary and ask for a lock. Oh, well, that's kind of lame. Why not have a strength check, where if the player has 8 or more strength, you can just kick in the door, break the lock, and then enter the loading screen. For a one-time story use, I think they could have managed to include skill checks like better Fallout games had. So we go to the mayor's office, and we can get the key in a number of ways. We can steal it, we can speak to the mayor, or go to his secretary. Notably, when we arrive, we see a scripted scene between Piper and Geneva. Piper is being insufferable and belligerent and acting like an actual child. I don't know how the writers thought she would be endearing, but here we are. Now, Piper and Geneva do a thing here that really, really annoys me. They refer to Piper as the press. It's one person. It's Piper. The NPCs here treat the press like it's some powerful entity or an entity at all when it's just one person. It's just weird. It comes off as the writers trying to force the dichotomy between the government that won't answer questions and the press trying to get to the bottom of things. But really, the story is that they just left us with one whiny, snarky, belligerent woman named Piper. And yet they try to build this up as the press. It's just another example of Bethesda's phony writing trying to make things more interesting than they actually are because they're not willing to put in the effort to make them more interesting. So, we can either speak to the mayor for the key or his secretary, Geneva. I do both to see what kinds of dialogue we get. Now, I think the mayor's options are decent but flawed. Since we already know that the mayor is indeed a synth working for the Institute, it doesn't make sense for him to allow us into Kellogg's house. If he knew for certain that the house was scrubbed and then he let us in, that would be one thing. But this house was never cleaned by the Institute, or anybody, and there are clues inside that literally lead us to Kellogg. The mayor should be sorry that our bastard was kidnapped, but steadfastly refuse. Instead, he will feign grief at your loss, but repeatedly dismiss your likelihood of finding anything, showing that he is going along to keep up appearances, but also trying to manage your expectations so you don't find anything. But he shouldn't let us in at all, if he was an actual synth agent for the Institute. But whatever. We do have the option to bribe him, which does not work, thankfully. Geneva's options are much better. We can bribe, flirt, or convince her via trauma dumping. All of these options work, and I'm glad to see the mayor's secretary drinking in the corrupt benefits of her position. We head back to Kellogg's house and open the door. Once inside, Nick will make comments about how the house is surprisingly small. Once again, Bethesda writers are incapable of letting any twist or surprise wait. They are so desperate to reveal it that the whole ordeal seems disingenuous. I mean, if we just look at how people in this town behave, I could be convinced that literally any of these people in this city work for the Institute, besides Myrna at the Diamond City Surplus. Everybody behaves so shady about Nick's identity, and everybody talks about how the Institute is spooky, but then they don't act like it. Almost everybody is in on a secret that the player doesn't know. But this isn't the case. It's actually the case that these writers are so amateurish and careless that they don't know how to write convincing NPCs. We find the obvious hidden room, and surprise, it's not cleared out. And why not? There is no reason why not, aside from allowing Nate to find Kellogg for this room to have been left this way. I suppose if we allow the theory that our whole journey was crafted by Father, which, by the way, that makes for a terrible fucking story, if we act as if that is the case, then this could make sense. But for any institution that we are to believe is at all competent and able to remain in the shadows, like the Institute, they would not be leaving loose ends on the scale of an entire stash room for their top mercenary. Then comes the worst part, and something that has been torn to pieces by other videos. Nick suggests dog meat. How does he know dog meat exists? Because the devs wrote him having their knowledge of the story. How does he know dog meat could track a man who we believe left months ago by one cigar? Because Nick is actually the writer, and he knows he wrote this quest, and he knows how it's going to play out. None of this makes sense. Nick shouldn't know dog meat, that one random dog from the wasteland, unless, of course, we've brought him around. Now, it just so happens in this playthrough, I have brought dog meat around. Not after I rescued Nick, so he still shouldn't know about it, but at least there could be an excuse for this. But the bigger problem is, if you never met Dogmeat in your playthrough, Nick will still know about him. Which means that Nick whistled, and the dog ran from the Red Rocket to Diamond City in a matter of seconds. This is just an absurd lack of foresight from the writers. They wanted an easy solution, and so they wrote themselves a nice little contrivance for their main story. Just pathetic levels of uncreativity. Now, that's actually where we will be ending the main story for Diamond City. There's only a bit more to cover for the entirety of the city, and the main quest's effects and relevance to Diamond City is minimal after this point. The only notable effects remaining are coming back to get Nick so that we can travel to Goodneighbor for the memory quest, and then the altercation after we've destroyed the Institute where it is revealed that Mayor McDonough is a synth. The latter has a lasting effect on the town, being the lack of a mayor, either by killing him or simply deposing him. Interesting, but underwhelming, especially considering it only happens after the climax of the main story. It's not something we can discover and do on our own. The player cannot know or figure it out until after the main story when the writers decided it was alright. Wouldn't it have been interesting if the option to oust Mayor McDonough as a synth was always available? From the first instant you walked into Diamond City, you could oust the mayor by discovering some transmissions between him and synths near CIT. Perhaps there is evidence in Kellogg's house, making sure you at least had to complete a couple quests in the game before finding out. Either way, the player could discover the mayor is a synth and have a few possible choices to make. We could take the information to Piper, who could post it. The town could rise up against the mayor, and you lead a mob to seize him and have him crucified on the Great Green Wall for treason against humanity. You could go to the mayor, reveal the information, and blackmail him. Perhaps everything in Diamond City remains the same as normal, while the guards give you 500 caps each time you stop in the city. Perhaps this could lead to some altercation where Piper figures it out, and you must either agree to let her post the work, or work with the mayor to dismantle the press we hear so much about. Perhaps we plant evidence in Piper's house to frame her as the synth instead, or convince her to check out a really interesting scoop in the playground and set her up to walk into a crime scene. She could be arrested and taken to jail, where she would remain unless the player had a change of heart. Or perhaps you could take the information to Goodneighbor and give it to Hancock. Since McDonough is his brother in the lore, I know, it's fucking stupid, right? Maybe this could allow for some quests involving Goodneighbor and Diamond City. Perhaps Hancock realizes his brother has been replaced by a synth and vows to destroy the abomination. If they were going to write in this connection, they could at least use it for some sort of payoff. Maybe we amass a bunch of Triggermen to Goodneighbor and siege Diamond City. The Triggermen versus the Diamond City security, Siege of Whiterun style. We shoot our way through the city until we arrive at the Tyrant's elevator. But oh no, they cut the cables. We have to fight through the stairwell to reach him. He has fortified himself in his office. We can't break it in. Blow it up with him still inside. Death to tyrants. Everybody realizes Goodneighbor and Diamond City are just trying to do the same thing. Survive and eke out some happiness in this harsh world. Now ties between the cities are bolstered, trade is increased, all is well. But no, those ideas I laid out are just not cool. They're not as cool as nothing, and then a forced confrontation in the endgame, right? Time to move on for all of our sanity. I'm going to take a moment to talk more about this non-existent synth problem. We are to believe that the theme of Diamond City is the last bastion of peace and society in a lawless post-apocalypse. But this Garden of Eden is plagued by the paranoia of robot body snatchers. And yet, almost nobody behaves as if this is the case. There is one shooting in the market and one Diamond City merchant who is paranoid. That's it. This is a pitiful lack of paranoia going on in one of the two cities in a game centered around paranoia and shadow governments replacing humans with synths. We should see this paranoia build into pandemonium several times, because if you know anything about human behavior, paranoia and mob mentality go hand in hand. Why don't we see public courts happening, where citizens have rounded up those suspected of being synths and are holding a public court to have them executed? Perhaps the Diamond City security break up the show and violently put down this public court. This could further the idea that the Diamond City Guard is oppressive. The game would have us believe they are, but we never really see that happening. And also, further, the notion that the people here don't trust the security and are fed up with the synth fears, which the game would also have us believe is the case. But we don't see either of these dynamics, even while the game tries to insist that this is the case. It's like the story of this whole game has been tell, don't show mentality, which is the opposite of how you should go about a story like this, and especially a video game in a visual medium. Maybe if they had the player being stalked the entire time you're in Diamond City by paranoid citizens who are keeping an eye on all the outsiders. Or have people regularly ask you inappropriate personal questions to determine if you are a synth. How do you chew? How many times do you go to the bathroom? When was your last burp? What was your mother's name? Do you have any children? How many beers do you drink? Why are you breathing so fast? Where did you come from? Where are you going? The kinds of questions people paranoid about synthetic humans replacing them would actually ask. But no. We will just have the player pretend everyone is paranoid without showing it, except for Myrna. Alright. Now this may surprise you, but there is one quest left in Diamond City. That's right, aside from an Institute quest and Valentine's personal quests that don't count for Diamond City since they are more of a companion quest than a town quest, and of course the quest where Mayor McDonough loses it, this will be the final available quest for Diamond City as a whole. Feel free to consult the wiki I did for this video to make sure I didn't miss anything. Like I said, I skipped over Nick's quests because they're terrible and they have no relevance to Diamond City, and the other couple of quests around town that are just faction quests that really have no bearing on the town and don't show us anything more about this place. Now that we're getting close to the end, doesn't it feel like we are missing something? Like some important quest on a bigger scale than what we have covered? I sure do. And that goes right back to my statement about Diamond City having nothing going on, which shouldn't be the case for one of the two actual towns in this game, and it definitely shouldn't be the case for a Fallout game. So which quest is left? Diamond City's greatest quest, hands down. Diamond City Blues. I saved the best for last, but I will note that I covered this quest extensively in my Good Neighbor video. I will be going over it again here, with more focus on the Diamond City elements. Alright, get ready for the best quest in Fallout 4, unironically. We head up to the Colonial Tap House, where we see one Darcy Pembroke having a drink. There is an altercation between her husband, Paul Pembroke, and the bartender, Henry Cook. So, to set the scene here, Cook is banging Darcy, and Paul is mad because he's a cuck. He came up here to prove a point, but leaves after getting his ass kicked. An existing conflict. Alright, right on. That's what I love to see. Not everything starting as soon as the player shows up. Here is a problem that has been going on in Diamond City, and makes this feel more like a real place. These are the kinds of interpersonal issues that we can see going on through people's daily lives in this city. This quest alone is doing more world building than half the shit in this town. Darcy asks us for a drink, and Henry asks us if we want anything. Well, Darcy is a whore and a bitch, and yet another alcoholic mother, so we tell her to go fuck herself. And we go find her weeping soy boy husband. We find the limp-wristed, weak-jawed man slouching in the market. He is very upset. He asks us for help dealing with his wife's lover. Now the part that makes this quest so good is the spaghetti pile of alternate choices and endings that it leaves in the player's hand. The way quests in an RPG should be. When we speak with Paul, we have some dialogue options. Paul asks for our help in teaching Cook a lesson. He says he doesn't want him dead, but it's clear it is going to be violent. We can either help him for caps or go alone. Unlike other quests, going alone actually has an effect on the story. If we go with Paul, it will activate the next portion of the quest, including Paul. If he does not come up, then he won't be included in the scheme. I will note that we cannot go to Diamond City Security about Paul hiring us to teach Cook a lesson. If we wanted to be a law-abiding homeowner of Diamond City, we should immediately report this to security and watch Paul be taken to prison for soliciting battery against a Diamond City citizen and business owner. But the game doesn't work that way, and this option isn't there. When we arrive with Paul, he will get heated and pull a gun on Cook pretty quick. Once again, the choice falls to the player. We can encourage Paul to take out Cook and join in on killing the bartender. Or we can encourage Paul to chill out and hear what Cook has to say. There is actually some really well-written dialogue here. Cook promises not to sleep with Darcy, and Paul rightfully calls this out as a meaningless gesture. Then, Cook has to up the bargaining price to something worth his life. He points out that the only reason Darcy comes to the Colonial Tap House to drink and fuck Henry is because she is mad at Paul. Mad at Paul for being a poor. Henry can solve Paul being a poor by including us in his deal. Cook tells us he runs a side hustle, helping Nelson Latimer spend his father's money. This is some really good world building here, using familiar characters within Diamond City. Anyway, we can direct the story from here with the wonderful player choice offered by this quest. We can convince Paul to accept the offer and join in on the job, but the game also keeps the option of killing Cook available through the entire exchange in the tap house, meaning that if at any time we should think his deal is a trap or at all disingenuous, we can choose to kill Cook over it. Very nice. This is the kind of stuff we should be seeing in these quests. Now we convince Paul to go along with it. Maybe the extra money will convince his wife that he's not so bad. If we were to choose not to follow him, Paul would continue in anyway, and never be seen again. See, the writers cared about cause and effect when they wrote this quest, because Paul going in there without us would only end one way. And sure enough, if we tell Paul we're going to help him, but we don't actually head in to help him, things play out just as they would, but without us there to chill him out. And we find out later that Cook killed Paul and disposed of the body. God, I love well-written quests. If we don't bring Paul to the meeting, then Cook and ourselves will have this conversation. The player has the option of turning to Paul. We can clue him into the plot if we decide, or keep him in the dark and keep the caps for ourselves. So more of that lovely player choice we see so little of. We head out of the tap house, and I'm disappointed that we cannot clue Malcolm Latimer into the scheme if we wanted to. Hey, rich and powerful guy in Diamond City, we're about to go kill your son. Give me 1,000 caps for this information, and 4,000 more if you want to know where. Some criminal activity like this would be very appreciated. The option to double-cross people in your quests should really be considered more, and I hope they do this in Fallout 5, though I doubt it. We travel to the meeting place, and once more there is a variety of options for the player. Unfortunately, all of these options include killing Nelson Latimer. This is one of the two big problems I have with this quest. Even though it is the best quest in the game, it is not without sin. Nelson Latimer must die, even if he is the last NPC alive and literally running for his life. This sucks quite a bit, because dialogue between Nelson and Cook would have been very good. The possibility for us to turn on Cook and join with Nelson to sell the chems does not exist. Just like the option to spill the tea on Cook's plans to the drug dealers or Marowski and get on the mob's good side does not exist. The option not to kill the son of a powerful figure in Diamond City does not exist. It's a shame, but luckily the content we are left with is still very good. We crash the drug deal and kill everybody, leaving only the essential NPC, Trish. I'll take this opportunity to mention that in my Good Neighbor video I called her Tish without the R. I don't know why, but I read her name as Tish instead of Trish. Then we have an interaction between Paul, Cook, and the player. Trish begs for her life, and uses the chem lab where these chems are manufactured as her bargaining chip. The player is given a choice: kill Trish or allow her to speak. This choice doesn't really matter since the chem password is on her body, which is a shame. I would much rather they actually trusted the player with the decision. Do we let her live and use the password to the laboratory? Do we play her and use her life as a means to manipulate the password from her before killing her? Or do we suffer the consequences and don't trust the junkie begging for her life? Because anyone will say anything when they are face to face with the black curtain of death. Either way, we gain access to the lab password. Interestingly, if we promise to let her live, Cook will shoot her as soon as the conversation ends. Because Cook knows that literally everybody snitches. That's why torture exists. Also, interestingly, if we kill Trish before she gives us the password, the dialogue camera will continue to lock itself onto her dead body in the following conversation, as if waiting for Trish to respond. This softlocks the quest completely. I had it happen 2 separate times while recording this, so don't kill Trish until the end. Then we have a dialogue with Cook and Paul. Cook says he's leaving town. They will definitely tie him to the steel, and he's been planning this move for a while now. Strange he wouldn't kill us and take the money, especially if he's skipping town after this. Seems like a very logical thing to do, but I guess Cook isn't such a bad guy after all. Then we talk to Paul and divvy up the spoils. There's a variety of choices here, exercising that lovely player choice. We can screw him over and take it all, or split it fairly, or a mix. We also have the option to kill both Paul and Cook at any point during this whole exchange. Considering how flagrantly Bethesda marks NPCs as essential, even Trish for the first half of this quest, I'm very pleasantly surprised that they actually allow the player to kill Paul and Cook and double-cross them. It's pretty shocking how happy I am when NPCs are killable in Fallout 4. Considering every NPC was killable in the old games, and there is only one essential NPC in all of Fallout New Vegas, you would think Fallout 4 would have the same level of player freedom. Get it? That's a joke, because it's a Bethesda title. And half the NPCs are unkillable because you're a child, and you wouldn't know that you shouldn't kill important NPCs. But now back to Diamond City Blues. We can actually kill Paul and Henry and do a double cross. It's amazing, and that's exactly what we are going to do. To further this quest, Paul must die here. We can see that Paul and Cook are both men of class to some extent, because they will both be hostile if we shoot the other. Neither of them really wanted the other dead. It's almost touching. We return to Diamond City and wait for a little bit for the quest to continue. Interesting note I discovered on my way back, the Diamond City guards strolling outside actually live in little shacks constructed on the edge of the stadium. Little green houses with no doors and big windows. Like a dozen feet away from a raider gang. Let's give it up for our boys in blue out here sleeping in a war zone to keep us safe inside the Great Green Wall. Other interesting notes while we are outside Diamond City. By using console commands and getting into the sky, you can close the gate and watch it open again. And also, to the right of the gate, on the roof, we can find a hidden diner. There's a fat man and a dead settler, along with a bed and a power armor station. I have no idea why it's here, and it's only accessible through console commands or other cheats. The power armor jetpack cannot get up here without the help of mods as far as I know. So there's a fun little Easter egg for you. Bethesda can't write for shit, but they've always been good about sprinkling hidden gems throughout the world. And one more interesting note. Cook's daughter will come into town after Diamond City Blues. She doesn't have much going on, but it is an amazing consequence of Cook disappearing. His daughter Colette will show up into town looking for him. Now, the only relevance his daughter has to the town is that she will kill Paul Pembroke if we blame him for Cook's death and if he's still alive at the time. Let me just say how badass, impressive, and very fitting this consequence is for the actions of Diamond City Blues. I love seeing things pay off. It's almost like it was well written. Paul was dead when I had this encounter, so I just say Cook is dead, get over it, and she accepts it. Nice. Now, moving on. This ends the quest Diamond City Blues. However, there is a sequel quest that is hard to find unless you play things out exactly as I have done them. We will need to wait a few days, and Paul's whore wife will come speak to us. She's upset about her missing husband, and he's nowhere to be seen. Now, for this to play out, we need to tell her that Paul is dead without implicating ourselves. We do so, and she leaves sad. Maybe you should have loved the father of your child when he wanted you. I don't know. Something to think about, Darcy. If we wait a bit and then go talk to her in the Pembroke residence, she will initiate the sequel quest, the Marowski Heist. This gives us a chance to check out the last house we need to break into, the Pembroke residence. We go in and Darcy actually has some of the best written dialogue I've heard in this game. She found a photograph while digging through Paul's things. Digging through your spouse's stuff after they die is a perfect setup that follows the previous events and makes complete sense. Now, the picture is of Paul Pembroke, Malcolm Latimer, and Henry Cook. Also, if you want dialogue that shows the player is an outsider, this is how you write it. She's surprised that the player doesn't know what they are standing in front of in the picture, because anyone above the age of 25 who grew up in the Commonwealth would know that this is Marowski's old chem lab, back from when he was the biggest gangster in the Commonwealth. By pointing out that we don't know a notable location from a notable guy in the vicinity Darcy points out that we aren't from around here in a way that is sensible and, most importantly, not abrasively condescending. Then she aptly points out that Marowski put out a bounty on whoever destroyed his drug lord operation 20 years ago, and they were never found. She says she needs a way to support her son, and this payout sounds perfect. Oh my god, what is this writing? This is amazing. Who wrote this? I need to shake their hand or free them from the dungeon Bethesda has them locked in. Everything here makes sense and follows a level of competence I have not seen yet in this game. She was digging through Paul's things and she found this picture. She understands what it implies. She understands that she can use this to her advantage. It's like Bethesda wrote an actual believable woman character. And also, Darcy is sharper than many people might give her credit for. She definitely comes off as just a whore bimbo mom drunk. But you only find out later on that it turns out she did care for her husband, she does care for her family, and she does care about herself in the future. It was a classic situation of someone just disassociating and trying to escape from the world because they're unhappy, and then not realizing how good things were until they're gone. Darcy is even sharper still when she doesn't choose a side for the blackmail. The only remaining members involved are Malcolm Latimer and the drug lord Marowski himself. I'd forgive literally all players for not knowing Marowski even exists. I mentioned this extensively in my Good Neighbor video, but the lack of mob presence and mob activity juxtaposed with these quests about how dangerous and active the mob is just breaks the logical consistency of the world. And it breaks it big time. That is very evident in this quest. However, this quest line is still the best in Fallout 4, and let's not let the mob issues detract from that. Darcy tells us to go with whoever will pay out more, which is the exact mentality she should have if she is doing this for a payout, for the express purpose of herself and her son now that Paul is dead. Alright, let's go check out the players involved. But before we do, let's have a look inside the Pembrooks residence. Well, privacy space and money are three things the Pembrooks do not have. Now, here's some more interesting twists about this quest. You can actually softlock yourself out of the whole quest, again, if you don't play things right here. You see, the next time we speak with Malcolm Latimer, he will be furious at us. He tells us that Marowski informed him we killed his son. First of all, this is pretty ridiculous since we killed everyone at that drug raid. Unless, of course, Marowski had a sniper watching, which I could very well believe. Either way, Malcolm blames us for his son's death, and we have a few ways of dealing with this. We can tell him it was Paul and shift the blame away from us. And Malcolm's following dialogue is actually very good. He speaks about Paul with disgust, but clearly he knows the man very well from how he talks. Considering their work together in the past, this is some great world building. We can tell him it was Marowski, and here's the soft lock. Malcolm will immediately hire us to take out Marowski. He will offer 400 caps, but we can talk him up to 600. If we take the offer and continue, the marker will forever float over Malcolm, who we now cannot extort. That is why it is important for the Marowski heist to blame Paul when speaking with Malcolm for the first time. You need to make sure you had this encounter before Darcy gives you the photo of the Marowski heist. If you don't have this encounter with Malcolm before getting the photo, the whole quest is soft-locked and you will never be able to extort him. We do just that and then proceed with the blackmailing. When we speak with Malcolm, he shares a bit about himself. Not much really, just that he grew up in the lower stands and worked his way up to practically running Diamond City. He will offer us the same 400 caps for the photo, and we can talk him up to 600. Well, this just isn't good enough, so let's go see what Marowski offers. If we head inside Good Neighbor, you'll be able to find the mob boss that you would never know existed unless you were doing this quest. Marowski offers an initial 500 caps for the evidence of his chem lab's destruction. Then he offers more for the payback of killing Malcolm Latimer. If we head back to Diamond City and take out Mr. Stick-Up-His-Ass, we can return to the drug lord for 500 more caps. That concludes the quest line. Returning to Darcy with the money is not an objective for completing the quest. However, we can return and choose to split it fairly or screw over yet another Pembroke. And that's the best quest Diamond City has to offer. Here's a less pleasant thing. If you are high enough level and return to the Dugout Inn, there will be a ghoul waiting here to offer you a job. His name is Edward Deegan, a ghoul who works for the Abbot family. It's just a quest about a spooky house of immortal degenerates. This is noteworthy because Diamond City is supposedly prejudiced against ghouls and don't let them in the city. If you bring Hancock, they will give you shit for it and literally tell you to get out. When you come here for the dig quest, Bobby No-Nose will wear a disguise to hide the fact that she is a ghoul for fear of being persecuted. But Edward is just allowed in because he's chill with the Diamond City security? Did he sneak in? Did they just decide to make an exception? Or is it because the devs programmed him to show up at bars around a certain level, and they didn't stop to think about the lore of the game they were making, because they wrote Diamond City one way, but need to interject the quests they are so proud of at the same time? That's just a little note on Edward Deegan and some more inconsistencies with the internal logic of Fallout 4. Let's do a brief overview of the city as a whole. There is a market with not a lot going on. The city is absurdly filthy for a place that people have been living in for generations. I don't know why Bethesda insists on portraying all of their towns like they were just hit by a hurricane. There's piles of shit and garbage everywhere. No one in 200 years has decided to clean up, or to scrap all of the chairs and the stands for metal, or to do literally any upkeep or renovation aside from Abbot painting the wall. I've said this in so many of my videos, but I'll say it again. These places should not be this disgusting. You can communicate it's a dire situation and a post-apocalypse without having to have shit lying everywhere. I know we're at the end here, but I'm just now realizing I never even touched on the fact that there is zero nightlife in Diamond City. No hookers because, of course, this is Bethesda, come on now. Not only is there no hookers, but there is just nothing to do here except, the one bar for the rich people and the one bar for the poor people? I mean, they couldn't have had, I don't know, a gladiating arena where they throw raiders or criminals or watch dog fights or mole rat fights or have a basketball court, something to do around here besides work, drink, and sleep. I mean, with how focused this town is on baseball, they couldn't have had, actual baseball. Maybe every week the entire town gets together and has a baseball game, and it's their kind of, holy act of patriotism that they all engage in for the Great Green Wall. Something interesting. Literally anything interesting going on. Diamond City has a shameful lack of content, especially considering it is one of 2 towns in this entire game. It is a pathetic lack of content, and nobody should ever forget what a downgrade this city is from all of the towns in the previous games. It has less quests, less houses, less population, and less towns overall. It sounds like a downgrade in every possible metric, and it is. There is no overarching quest line or interesting story. It's just a blank slate for the main story and a location full of shops. There are 2 good quests in this town, out of the very few fetch quests and the couple radiant quests, or I'm just going to name drop a thing here, we'll consider that a quest. Diamond City, overall, is a huge letdown, and that is very sad to see from a Fallout game. I hope that in Fallout 5 they actually try to take some notes from what they could have done better in Fallout 4. But to be honest, I have a feeling Emil Pagliarulo and Todd Howard are nothing but proud of Fallout 4, which is even more pathetic. And that, finally, brings us to the very end. For those of you that made it this far, I sincerely thank you. This took a long time to make. I'll see you in the next one. Wale, amicus.